Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anybody can hear me out there, push one in the chat or say something. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anybody can hear me, push one in the chat. Hey, Mike Hamilton, what's going on? Peace. J. Micah, peace. What's going on? Rick Boss, like the name, fam. What's going on? Yeah, good that you guys can hear me. So, as usual, hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. There's a document description beneath the video for you to follow along with. Tonight's hangout, Geopolitics, episode 242. Definitely going to be an interesting hangout based on some of the events that's been happening and transpiring over the last 48 hours. A lot of people should cover a lot of things based on some of the events that that have occurred that will be relevant to a lot of ADOS people as well. So we had a pretty good open chat hangout last night. So if you have not checked that out, man, if you missed that, man, you missed out on some good stuff, man. Definitely go back and revisit that. I know there's other hangouts going on right now, and people are probably busy watching watching those hangouts rather than coming over here getting some of this game, international politics game, geopolitics game. But I can dig it though. I can dig it. People want to be entertained. It's all good. All right, we'll get started. Hey Gabe, what's going on, bro?
Hey, not too much. Just jumping on. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, cool.
All right, let's get started. All right, so first item on the docket is from BusinessInsider.com. A U.S. Navy destroyer is keeping a close eye on the advanced Russian warship roaming the Caribbean. One of Russia's most advanced warships is sailing around in the Caribbean, but it's not alone, as the U.S. Navy has dispatched a destroyer to keep a close eye on it. The Admiral Khrushchev is the first of new class of Russian frigates built for power projection, arrived in Havana on Monday, accompanied by the multi-purpose logistics vessel Elburns, the sea tanker, and the rescue tug Nikolai Chika, the Associated Press reported. The Russian warship made headlines earlier this year when Russia reported that it was arming the vessel with a new weapon, the electro-optic Filin 5P42, that emits an oscillating beam of high-intensity light designed to cause temporary blindness, disorientation, and even nausea. The Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyer USS Jason Dunham was operating roughly 50 miles north of Havana as of Tuesday morning. USNI News reported citing ship tracking data. The Navy told the outlet that it was monitoring the situation. The Admiral Khrushchev entered the Caribbean Sea via the Panama Canal on June 18th. The ship departed its home port of, let me see, increase my screen, Severomorsk in February and has since traveled more than 28,000 nautical miles, making stops in China, Djibouti, Sri Lanka, Colombia, and now Cuba. The warship is prepared to make port calls at several locations across the Caribbean. Citing the Russian Navy has not disclosed the purpose of the trip. Over the past decade, Russia has occasionally sent warships into the Caribbean. While these deployments are typically perceived as power plays, Russia characterizes them as routine. Russia has also sent Tu-160 strategic bombers into the arena, most recently in December. While Russian ships have made visits to the Caribbean in the past, the trip comes at a time when the U.S. militaries are finding themselves in close proximity. For instance, earlier this year, a Russian destroyer nearly collided with a U.S. cruiser in the Pacific, an incident that came just a few days after a Russian fighter jet aggressively buzzed a Navy warship over the Mediterranean Sea. Russia also sent ships from its Baltic fleet to monitor the NATO Baltics 2019 exercises held in June near Russia. These exercises involved ships and aircraft from 16 NATO allies and 2 partner countries. So what's going on here, man, is pretty interesting because at the time of all of this trade wars, INF treaties being suspended, conflicts in Syria, conflicts in Venezuela, JCPOA in Iran being suspended, sanctions being put on Turkey, or at least in talks of putting sanctions on Turkey over the S-400 deal. There's a whole lot of firewood ready to be burned. All it takes is one strike from a match. So what could possibly happen here is, a conflict can come out of this. Somebody can bump into somebody, and all it takes is a single shot to be fired.
I was going to ask: are these just like intimidation tactics to say, "Hey, just in case, you thought it was sweet, we just gonna kind of roam around intimidating anybody"? I mean, because it seems like it's pretty much made itself around several nations. The ship. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, if there was going to be a conflict, they wouldn't send one ship. I mean, it's a powerful ship, but they wouldn't send one.
Right.
If they were gonna go to war, they would they would send a weaker vessel and make that the victim, right? Instead of sending the most advanced warship and letting it sink, because that's what exactly what would happen. I mean, it could defend itself, but you get ganged up in someone else's territory. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of armament. So
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It seems like just some intimidation tactic to say, hey, you know, just in case something pop off, this is what we got. But not 100% sure. Hmm.
Yeah, I just think that it takes a lot of guts for Russia to send their warships into the Caribbean, especially through the Panama Canal. But um, given Russia's position in this global society, they're still considered to be a superpower, not because of wealth, but because of political and military projection.
Hmm.
So if they're showing up in the Caribbean, it's not because they're scared, but because they have friends in the Caribbean. We just need to accept that. Venezuela, Cuba, Panama, or not Panama, Nicaragua, Bolivia, Brazil. Brazil is a part of the BRICS. So when we put all this in perspective, it's routine. It's like the article said, it's routine, but people are making it seem like these guys are coming for a fight, but you don't come for a fight by yourself. You're gonna come with your whole posse, and it doesn't seem
Hmm.
like Russia came for a fight. They actually came to go visit their friends, and they're being stop and frisk, if that makes any sense, in the Caribbean. All right, let me get to this next article. All right, this one is from AlJazeera.com. Maduro says he will be ruthless if opposition attempts coup. President President's warning comes after officials reportedly foiled a coup plot that included murdering the Venezuelan leader. Let's see if I can expand this. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro warned on Wednesday that he would be ruthless with the opposition if they attempted a coup d'état after his government said it had thwarted a plot to assassinate him. He would be ruthless in a revolutionary counteroffensive against a attempted fascist coup. Uh, Ruthless. An agitated Maduro said in an address broadcast nationwide on radio and television. Earlier, Maduro's spokesman, Jorge Rodriguez, said on a state television that a network of mostly retired police officers and soldiers plan to bomb a key government building, seize a Caracas airbase, and loot Venezuela's central bank. He also said that he also said the plotters wanted to edge opposition leader Juan Guaido out of Venezuela's political landscape. Guaido, leader of the opposition dominated National Assembly, is seeking to remove Maduro from power with the backing of more than 50 nations. In January, he invoked the Constitution to declare himself interim president, calling Maduro's 2018 re-election illegitimate. Rodriguez said the purported network wanted to steal a helicopter to liberate Raul Badul, a former defense minister now in jail, and install him as president. The government has claimed various plots over the years, generally offering little or no evidence to back its charges. The opposition contends Maduro uses such claims to justify his crackdown on dissent. Guaido dismissed the latest claim as yet another attempt by the government to distract from Venezuela's real problems. Maduro came, Maduro's came, Maduro came under attack last August by two drones loaded with explosives, which detonated near the president while he spoke at an outdoor military celebration. He was not harmed in an attack, which officials called an assassination attempt. Rodriguez charged that Colombian President Ivan Duque and Chilean President Sebastian Pinera backed the purportedly thwarted coup plot, but he did not provide evidence. Rodriguez showed that showed what he said were scenes from 56 hours and intercepted video conference calls with alleged plotters hashing out a strategy for the attack plan for June 23rd. The spokesman said the First Lady, Celia Flores, and Diaz, Diaz-Dada Cabello, leader of Venezuela's governing Socialist Party, were among those targeted for assassination. So this guy is still kicking around. Juan Guaido. He thinks that he can run the country on his own as a millennial, but in reality, um, you know, he doesn't really have the support on the ground, which is why he needs all these countries to back him up. What he's trying to do would be the equivalent of somebody like Nancy Pelosi or even Debbie Wasserman Schultz trying to take Trump out of power by usurping him and claiming that they are the legitimate candidate, president or leadership of the United States of America because of the election. They feel that was a fraud. So basically, they can kind of usurp him by using that as justification. But in reality, to usurp your elected official would be um, treasonous because you're working with outside powers to do this. Um, Plus, it's terrorism. You're all these assassination attempts. Using vehicles to run people down, who's in support of the government. Blowing up civil infrastructure such as utility grids and gas pipelines. I mean, this is terrorism, but the way the media spins it here is as if this is just normal for business. We support this guy who's planning to kill their own president, but in the United States, if you decided to say something like that, they would arrest you for sedition. You have any thoughts on this, Gabe?
No thoughts on that one. Nope.
Yeah, so basically, this guy still believes that he's in power, but he never had this power. Working with outside forces such as the United States, Germany, Britain, Colombia, Chile, maybe even Argentina for that matter. If I remember correctly, he toured around Latin America, except for Mexico. Mexican government would not allow him into the country, but he's under this impression that he has this international support. But I can tell you right now, you don't have support on the ground. You don't have international support. It's not going to do anything for you. All right, let me get to the next article. All right, this is just an additional article to the previous. This one is from Reuters. The Maduro mystery: why the armed forces still stand by Venezuela's beleaguered president. One of the central mysteries of Venezuela's slow motion collapse: why does the military continue to support Nicolas Maduro, the president who has led the once prosperous South American country into poverty and chaos? The answer, according to people familiar with Venezuela's military structure, starts with Maduro's late predecessor, Hugo Chavez, the charismatic caudillo who cemented strongman socialist rule in the nation of about 30 million people. In a series of actions that began in 1999, the former lieutenant colonel and one-time coup leader began taming the military by bloating it, buying it off, and politicizing it, intimidating the rank and file, and fragmenting the overall command. Once he took office in 2013, Maduro handed key segments of the country's increasingly ravaged economy to the armed forces. Select military officers took control of the distribution of food and key raw materials. A National Guard general and military deputies now manage the all-important national oil companies, FEDESA. The two leaders who also embedded intelligence agents with the help of Cuba's security services within barracks within barracks. Former officers say instilling paranoia and diffusing most dissent before it happens. Intelligence agents have arrested and jailed scores of perceived troublemakers, including several high-profile officers, even for minor infractions. The overall, the overall, or the overhaul, former military officials say, created a jumble and partisan chain of command. Top officers, grateful for perks and fearful of retribution, are often more preoccupied with pleasing Socialist Party chiefs than the national defense. Uh, Instead of drills and war games, some generals find themselves fielding calls to plant vegetables or clear garbage. Many low-ranking soldiers, destitute and desperate like most Venezuela's working class, have deserted the military in recent years, joining at least 4 million other fellow amigos in seeking a better life elsewhere. But few senior officers have heeded the opposition's call for rebellion, leaving the armed forces top-heavy, unwielding, and still standing by Maduro. The chain of command has been lost, said Cleaver Alcala, a former general who retired in 2013 and now supports the opposition from Colombia. There's no way to know who is in charge of operations, who is in charge of administration, and who is in charge of policy. Some commanders, like Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino, a four-star general, are nearly as much a face of the administration as Maduro. Padrino, a sanctioned by is sanctioned by the United States for ensuring Maduro's hold on the military and government while the Venezuelan people suffer, according to the U.S. Treasury Department. Reuters was unable to reach Padrino or other senior officers mentioned in this article. Venezuela's defense ministry didn't reply to the email or telephone inquiries. The country's information ministry, responsible for government communications, including those of the president, didn't reply to Reuters either. Padrino is hardly alone. Consider the sheer number of officers awarded flag rank in Venezuela. The country's roughly 150,000 Army, Navy, Air Force, and National Guard troops are a fraction of more than 1 million who make up the U.S. Armed Forces. Yet Venezuela, with as many as 2,000 admirals and generals, now boasts as much as twice the top brass as the U.S. military. More than 10 times as many flag officers as existed when Chavez became president. The estimate is according to calculations by former Venezuelan officers and the U.S. military. So I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's important for people to understand that when Chavez came to power, he lifted millions of people out of poverty. I think something like 5 million people out of poverty in less than 5 years. It was something rough to that effect. 5 years or something to that effect. So he lifted all these people out of poverty. So there's a lot of people who are grateful for what he has done. Now, the military understands that this sort of movement that was started, the Bolivarian movement, has been more benefit than it has not. So to desert the military, to desert the leadership now in the movement, what are you going to replace it with? Because as it stands, you really don't have an alternative. And these guys understand that, and to leave it now would be suicidal. I mean, what are you going to do? You have half the country, or if not more than half the country, that is in full support of the movement. How are you going to go up against that? How are you going to control all these people? Unless you split the country in half and partition it, and then you go do your own thing on your side, and they do their thing on their side. But then that's going to end up in a civil war. So the military understands this. They understand the cost of doing business. You have anything you want to add to that, Gabe?
Nope, nothing to add to that one. Just
Okay.
listening intently.
hmm All right, let me get to the next article. Also, I want to point out, this is a liberal fantasy that somehow, some way, um, the United States military is going to go into Venezuela and try to take it, and that they have 1 million troops, and that compared to the 150,000 that Venezuela has. Well, Venezuela doesn't have a big military because it doesn't go around invading other countries. Um, so their military doesn't have to be as massive as the United States is, or as the United States has currently. So even if they did get into a fight, the United States would have a hard time trying to take over that country. 1 million troops may not work out as well in Venezuela as it did in, let's say, Iraq. Um, you see, the United States has even a difficult time trying to secure Afghanistan. We see that the Taliban has become more political and has garnered 50 up to 55% support in the country. How do you contend with something like that? Even after after all the tanks and um, you know fighter jets and attack helicopters, that 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 doesn't seem to scare them. People are going to support it because that's that's their preference. You can't come in there and think that occupying the country or invading the country is going to change the politics for the long term. People know what they want and they have a preference and they have the right to choose who their leadership is going to be, and it's not up to the United States to determine that. All right, let me get to this next article. All right, this one is from the Washington Post.com. Iranian president warns Tehran will increase uranium enrichment as much as we want on Sunday. Increase this. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani warned Wednesday that Iran would increase its enrichment of uranium this weekend to whatever level was needed beyond the cap set by a 2015 nuclear agreement, a move that could further escalate tensions with the United States. Iran has repeatedly threatened that by July 7th, it will increase enrichment above 3.67% concentration of uranium 235, the level of fissile isotope allowed under the nuclear deal. Unless it receives some relief from U.S. sanctions, European countries are struggling to meet Tehran's demand to keep the 2015 nuclear deal alive. Our enrichment rate is not going to be 3.67% anymore, Rouhani said. It's going to be as much as we want it to be. Rouhani's commitment is carried by the state broadcaster came after Iran on Monday breached the 300 kilogram limit for low enriched uranium allowed under the deal. That move did not put Iran significantly closer to holding enough high enriched uranium to produce a nuclear weapon, whereas combining an increase in its uranium stockpile with heightened enrichment levels could reduce its breakout time, the period it would need to enable the production of a weapon. Uranium enriched to the low level of 3.67%, uh, U-235 is suitable for fuel in a nuclear reactor. But if it is enriched to much higher levels, around 90%, it can be used as fissile material in a nuclear weapon. Iran has previously said it it plans to enrich it plans to raise enrichment to 20%, a level that it possessed in a stockpile before the deal in its in that it argued was needed to produce isotopes for medical and scientific purposes in an old U.S. supplied research reactor in Tehran. Such a move would mean that Iran could jump to producing weapons grade uranium more quickly. Experts estimate that before the nuclear deal, the amount of time that Iran needed to accumulate enough enriched uranium for a nuclear bomb was 2 or 3 months. The deal was designed to increase the breakout period to about a year. Iran argues that it should no longer be bound by the limits of the deal if it does not also benefit from the sanctions relief that the 2015 agreement promised in exchange. Since withdrawing from the United States, from the deal last year, the Trump administration has reimposed sanctions, which have also made it difficult for European companies to trade with Iran. So,
Yeah,
the gist here is this:
it's going down.
they can speed up, they can ramp up in the next 30 days and have 20% uranium ready.
Yep.
You're a former nuclear guy yourself. Could you explain to most people what enrichment is, what uranium is,
Yeah.
and what the percentile means?
So there are usually two different elements that are used for either, even commercial or even weapons grade nuclear. So those elements are plutonium and uranium. Uranium 235, well, those are typically used. Uranium 235 is an isotope, right? This doesn't come naturally this doesn't appear naturally in nature. So as a result, there needs to be an enrichment to make it 235, where it makes it more capable to the process of fission, right? That splitting of atoms to produce that nuclear energy. So here, it seems like Iran is mad because they have sanctions upon them. So they're kind of threatening that whole process of going above what has previously been agreed upon, a level of enriching uranium to the point where it's not able to produce a weapon. But they're like, oh no, I'm just going to go beyond that. It seems like at least the article implies or seems to imply that it's because of the sanctions that is driving this. And we've seen this before in the previous administration. I mean, you kind of get that branch between cybersecurity and nuclear there is because even during the Obama, actually right when Obama was coming into office, there was the Nance there also nuclear facility in the Middle East was doing some enrichment of uranium. And during this process, Israel was a little bit worried about this, and also the U.S. was worried about this, that they might produce weapons, right? And people know that Israel and Iran have this nuclear history. I mean, not nuclear history, but I guess just a divide there, right? And since Israel is an ally of the U.S. steps in, and boom, Stuxnet, right? Stuxnet is a malicious, it's a worm, it's a malicious malware, which was used during that time, the Obama administration, to cause issues within the Nance nuclear facility, the enrichment facility in Iran. So they were able to sabotage that previous enrichment program and be able to pretty much call them out and be able to stop that particular program. So now it seems like history has the possibility of repeating itself, where they're like, yeah, we're going to enrich to produce weapons, and there's nothing you can do about it. And there was something that was done about it. So we'll see what happens.
Brother Nagone, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on? What's going on, family? What's going on, Gabe? How you doing?
Hey.
Chill, man, chilling.
How's it going?
Everything you want to add to this?
No, I think he covered that, perfectly. You guys are kind of cruising along here, so if I have anything that I really want to add, no, I'm just totally, actually, totally agreeing with what's being said. So let's keep it rolling, fellas. I'm just rolling with you.
All right. Well, my other piece on this is that Iran Iran can't trust the United States if they renege on the deal. Okay, so you stop them from you suspend the JCPOA. Okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
What about their money? So either they stop enrichment and you give them their money back, or they continue to enrich the process and get and go back to what it was pre 2015. You can't have it both ways. And I think the problem is Israel is dictating these policies
Mm-hmm.
for the United States and using Trump as a bulwark against Iran because he tore up the deal and basically said, "Oh, this is a terrible deal." How can it be terrible? Everybody else agreed on it. The Europeans agreed on it. The Russians agreed on it. The Chinese agreed on it. I don't understand what the problem is. The UK agreed on it. So now what's the problem? Well, we don't like it. Well, what don't you like about it? It's a terrible deal. Okay, what's so terrible about it? Well, we just don't like it. Well, that's not that's not very diplomatic to tear up a deal and then tell these guys to go take a hike. I mean, Iran has hundreds, if not thousands, of nuclear scientists in their country, and nuclear engineers. What are these guys supposed to do? In the meanwhile, not work and go drive for Uber and Lyft? That doesn't make any sense. So what I'm saying here is they're kind of in the just right to actually do what's in their best interest, which is to continue enrichment if we're not going to get our money back.
When do you think this all comes to a head? You think at the change of, I guess, American politics, right? If Trump stays, or if Trump goes, you think that where things possibly change, or I mean,
okay, so Trump leaves, and now what? Comes if the United States reneges on the deal, that doesn't mean that everybody else should renege too.
Right.
And if the United States is basically sitting in the corner pouting, with their lip out, the Europeans still have a lot of investments inside Iran. You have Renault, you have Siemens, you have Volkswagen of Europe. You have many companies. Boeing had deals inside contracts inside Iran. Who else? Airbus. You have a lot of mega corporations, multinational corporations who have investments there that can't get to their investments because this orange head guy decides to pull out of the deal on behalf of some people who can't, who don't even benefit us us as a country right now. I mean, why should we be fighting over people with little hats on their heads going huzza everywhere they go? I'm saying the Europeans want a better deal, want to keep the deal on the table. They want to support it, but you have these guys, in Washington who are saying otherwise, and it seems to be causing more friction than is necessary.
Well, that's why you also have some people putting pressure on really, kind of almost getting rid of NATO, because the Europeans are sitting back. They're saying, listen, they have to now start to roll within what their interests are, as opposed to what others might be that are not serving them well. So this is going to come down to hardcore kind of economics, and energy is going to play a big role here. And what are the Europeans going to do? How are we going to really play that game with them? I mean, what are they going to do? Go to Russia for their energy after? I mean, you have to really look at what's really going on here. So I really feel as though the Europe is they're going to make some hard decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump right now, he's, like I said, I've always felt that what's going on with him, his advisors and so forth, I don't think these guys are that bright, man. I just don't think these guys are that sharp. I don't know what more to say, but I just don't think these guys are that on top of it.
I don't think it's so much that they're not that sharp, but they're actually trying to sabotage his administration. they'll put him in the corner where he has no choice but to go ahead with it.
I think so. Okay.
Yeah, well, because it's not so much that they're not smart. I mean, they've been in office. I mean, they've been dealing in politics for the last 25, 30, 35, 40 years. So they're not ignorant as we would like to think they are. But they're doing this on purpose to force Trump to capitulate to Israel's demands. You see, and it's happening on both sides, whether it's the left or the right. You see Chuck Schumer, who proclaims himself to be a proud Zionist, a Christian Zionist. You see Lindsey Graham saying I'm a proud Zionist. And they're over there visiting, Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, walking around with what do you call that? What's the name of the gun company? Not Ruger. I think it's Smith and Wesson or Winchester or something like that. Walking around with their T-shirts on and stuff like that, like it's cool. And it's like, how do you get to travel to this country? And most Americans can't even travel there.
So just for clarification about the Zionist thing, right? This is a religious group that believes that it's in the best interest of Christians to be in alliance with those from Israel, right? The Jews, right? Is that the Zionist faith?
That would probably be a technical. That would probably be one technical explanation on the surface, but on the deeper side of it, it would be more aligned with supremacy. This idea that they have a right over others, to go and do whatever they want at the best interest or on behalf of what happened 4,000 years ago in Jerusalem, which is false, because the original Jews didn't look anything like these didn't look like these guys coming out of Europe. As a matter of fact, they didn't come out of Europe.
Yeah.
If you read the Bible says otherwise, and for whatever reason they say otherwise. But these guys seem to have a difference of opinion on interpretation of what the scripture says.
So there are politics and religion playing hand in hand with some of these things that are happening. Is that what you're?
They have to use that in order to justify their position. By their position, if they're saying that our ancestors from 1,000 years ago were here in this place, and so we have a right to be here. Well, what happens when you talk to the Native Americans about the United States of America? Right. Should the Europeans go back to? Should white people go back to Europe because Native Americans were here long before they were, by 2,000, 3,000 years? I don't think they're going to use that, right? But if you're a Zionist, you're allowed to get away with that type of stuff. It has basically become more of a cult, and they're punishing Palestinians, for crimes that they have not committed. I was having a discussion with somebody before, and they said, Israel has a right to exist, and that the Palestinians, if they don't like it, they should leave. And I scratched my head, and I'm saying, where do you think they're going to go?
Because they both claim Holy Land, right? But
it's pretty holy, all right.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. Who that just joined? Dr. Phoenix?
Yes, sir. How's everyone doing this evening?
What's going on, bro?
Nothing much. How's everyone doing this evening?
Dr. Phoenix, how are you doing?
Chill, man.
Doing good. Yep.
Yeah, I'll just add these quick comments. Years ago, I used to do some political consulting when I had gotten out, about a couple years after I got out of the military. But anyhow, so I used to work with a very well-known Democratic group. But anyhow, so my first real foray into politics, I actually end up dealing with a lot of Jewish lobbyists and stuff like that. So, to go to what Nagon was saying is that the Jews have always had this had always had this counter operation that they ran in the U.S. So their principal way they typically done it is through APAC. So if and anyone's familiar with it, and I'm pretty sure they still have it to this day. Maybe not quite as infamous as it was years ago, but they used to they used to reach out to HBCUs. So they used to go principally to Howard. They used to go to HBCUs, and so they would actually get young political science majors, whatever, and they would actually recruit these kids as as just initially as just some I guess some operatives, if you will, for lack of a better term. They were recruitment as operatives, and eventually they would send them over to Tel Aviv, and they'll send them over for a summer for like an internship, and so they'll work in the Israeli parliament, and so they get to learn the inner workings of the government in Israel. And so again, these folks will come back, and obviously they will end up lobbying and doing stuff on behalf of the Jewish government and obviously APAC. And so again, Israel has always ran a counter a counter strategy within the U.S. itself. I mean, they've undermined practically every major presidency for the most part. I mean,
since JFK.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I mean, they've always done this. I mean, you know that infamous story, those infamous stories that were coming out during Obama's presidency of him and Benjamin Netanyahu not getting along and stuff like that. I mean, it was pretty infamous, the stories, but the articles, the stories that were written about the relationship between those two gentlemen. And so there's a very good book brothers should probably check out. It's called Gideon's Spies. And it tells a story about how the Mossad was created. And so if folks are familiar with the Mossad, they operate pretty much like the MI6, CIA.
That's a great book. And then there's also another one out that I read years ago called The Sword of Gideon.
Yes.
I don't know if you heard about that one. And
Yes.
excellent stuff. Great, Dr. Phoenix. Go break it down. Break it down.
Yeah. And so again, the Mossad actually arose from it was the business community, the entrepreneurs, and within Israel, they actually created the Mossad, and part of it was because one, they were actually for a while, for quite a number of years, they didn't have no real answer to the quote Palestinian issue for back in the 30s and 40s. They didn't really have much of an answer to the Palestinians. So eventually their business folk got together, and eventually they helped to create the Mossad. And so we all know the rest is history. But again, as it relates to Iran, Israel has been a principal power in that region for decades. Everyone remembers back in the 70s where you had the infamous war between Egypt and yeah. And so again, so I mean, for the most part, Israel has dominated that region, and so you've had some of the major, if you will, Islamic powers in that region. They've been seeking to gain that control, and obviously probably the most powerful one of that, prior to the fall of Iraq in the early 90s was Iran. And so again, I mean, this just goes back to just sort of the clandestine nature of how Israel has operated throughout the world. I mean, they've been killing and assassinating Iranian nuclear scientists for at least the last couple decades. So I mean, again, this is just one of the many ways how Israel has used both its own personal efforts and then kind of sort of sicking their big brother, the U.S. on Iran.
While they themselves have nuclear weapons inside Haifa.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if I'm sure brothers on the panel probably are familiar with this, but Israel actually helped to South Africa to become the only nuclear power in Africa. Again, they sold them. Yeah, they sold them. They sold them the tritium that they needed to make nuclear weapons.
That's right. President Botha, he spoke on that, and he challenged, and he was like, "Yeah, well, Israel has helped us, develop, our military. Would you like me to name them?" And and he was talking to Mike Wallace at the time, and Mike Wallace, who's Jewish, Mike Wallace did not take him up on naming who those Jews were. both of us sitting up in there talking real strong about how Israel very much backed up, the South African apartheid government and strengthened them and helped them to get nuclear powered. And all
Yeah.
the whole nuclear game that was given up was by Pollard, if you guys remember him.
So again, they sold South Africa the tritium that was needed to make the nuclear weapons, and gave, with his background nuclear engineering, he's familiar with tritium.
I'm familiar with it as well.
And so again, one of the interesting things was that prior to Nelson Mandela coming into power, they actually disarmed all the nuclear weapons. So again,
allegedly.
Well, yeah, allegedly.
Right.
Yeah, allegedly. But again, so for the most part, Israel has always waged these clandestine wars in that region, and I would say even across Africa as a whole. I mean, for everyone's familiar with the conflict in Sudan. Israel has had a big part in that conflict as well.
Yeah, they pretty much had a part of all of Africa, destabilizing Africa. I mean, the last sitting president to actually challenge AIPAC in Israel was John F. Kennedy, and a week after he wanted to put them on the the list of foreign entities in the United States as being illegal, was John F. Kennedy, and a week later he got his head blown off. So he was spying on Israel's nuclear development in Haifa, which was what the USS Liberty was about.
Yep.
Spy on him. He sent them over there.
So again, like I said, I just urge the brothers to check out Gideon's Spies and check out the other book that Brother Nagone mentioned as well, Gideon's Sword. These are great books if you want to learn about the history of Israel and how it became this clandestine power that operates from the shadows. Those are two very good books brothers need to read if you really want to get a crash course into how modern day Israel came to be.
All right.
And they were very violent, very clandestine, very furtive, very dangerous, and operates in many respects kind of like a rogue state, doing what they kind of want in the region. It's wild. It's wild. A lot of stuff that they've been able to get away with, just not in the region, but like I said, in Africa as well. It's people would be wise to study it. But if you say anything about Israel, that might run countercurrent to the exchange that they would like to have. You're anti-Semitic.
Yeah, don't forget that Israel supported Argentina in their war against the British in 1984.
The Falklands War.
The Falkland Wars. So they supplied Argentine military with planes, weapons, and bombs to damn near almost take out the British. And the United States actually did not get involved in that. They actually declined. And these are supposed to be NATO partners. They had to rely on the French to come help them.
Yep.
We have to keep in mind that. We have to keep in mind that all superpowers are not actually super in their actions. There's a possibility that they can actually lose a war too, even against what's considered to be a weaker power.
Well, that's where the whole symmetrical, asymmetrical, and all type of warfare comes from. Different types of wars, bring about different types of victories. So, we've tasted it. Certainly, Vietnam. We were fought to a draw, literally, in Korea. I don't know what anybody wants to say about Afghanistan, but it's kind of interesting what's going on over there as well. So.
I think that I don't know. I just came in, so I don't know if you brothers talked about the MI6 going. The operations they got going on in China, and I think that
it's at the end.
Okay, yeah. I'll get into the Afghanistan thing later, but
Yeah. Let me get to this next article from BreakingDefense.com. Why would Russia spoof Israeli GPS F-35 in Iran? Let me spread this out. Israeli sources are increasingly convinced that the 3 weeks of GPS disruptions for civilian flights are a side effect of Russian jamming and spoofing in Syria, where Moscow is trying to interfere with both Western airplanes, including cutting-edge stealthy F-22s and F-35s and improvised terrorist drones. Now, the situation is rife with rumor, with the Israeli government avoiding any official statement and still investigating other sources. But if Russia is indeed, Nagone, you have to mute yourself up, brother.
Oh, you can hear something from the background? Okay.
Yeah. Now the situation is rife with rumor, with the Israeli government avoiding any official statement and still investigating other sources. But if Russia is indeed disrupting a friendly nation's GPS by accident, why haven't they stopped? The answer may lie in the limits of Russian electronic warfare, which, while far more potent than the U.S. military electronic warfare, still relies on raw power, more precise targeting. It may also show the weakness of the warm relationship Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cultivated with Vladimir Putin, which could run aground on Russia's increasing support for Iran. Yesterday, the Israeli Defense Forces sponsored but editorially independent radio station Galei Tzahal reported that Russia is behind the jamming. Russian officials and state-friendly media intermediately denied this accusation as fake news. The Israeli Defense Ministry has not commented, and Israeli aviation officials have said there is no evidence of a Russian link. So what is the cause? I don't know, an IAA spokesman said. Earlier this week, the International Federation of Airline Pilots Association and then Israeli Airports Authority announced many flights, not all, have lost GPS satellite signal while flying into and out of Ben Gurion International Airport. But there has been no risk to passengers, the IAA assured the public, because the affected aircraft simply switched to backup system. And intriguingly, ground-based GPS systems are unaffected. That makes jamming of the aviation GPS suspiciously specific. Another sign that it's not a simple glitch, but some kind of electronic weapon. And the Russians have invested heavily in high-powered spoofing systems that send out false GPS signals up to 500 times stronger than the real ones, leading civilian navigators miles astray. Russia has reportedly used GPS jamming in Scandinavia, Ukraine, and Syria. Informed Israeli sources tell Breaking Defense the likely source is either Russian forces inside Western Syria or warships in the Eastern Mediterranean. That fits with the reports Russia is carrying on an extensive electronic warfare campaign in Syria. The Russians' ostensible objective is simply to protect their own forces from constant attacks by terrorist drones, which rely on radio control and GPS. But they are also taking the opportunity to test a host of new technologies in real-world operations, especially against the latest Western systems like the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which Israel has used to strike Iranian affiliated targets in Syria, as well as ballistic missile defense and classified drones. And both U.S. and U.K. commanders have said the Russians are actively, deliberately jamming their aircraft because the West is supporting factions hostile to pro-Moscow Assad regime. Anyways, I'm not going to read all of this, but the main, the gist of this is that Russia is paying attention to everything in the Middle East. And regardless of the fact that Israel may have good relations with them, they have very little interest in seeing a war break out because Israel has a itch that needs to be scratched for Iran. Bombing Iran at this point would open up, the the gates of hell for Israel, because I don't think that Israel can actually respond directly to an Iranian countermeasure. So rather than let Israel go in there and start light a fire, it's better to just suppress it as much as possible with electronic warfare. Gabe, you are involved in cybersecurity as myself. You have any thoughts on cybersecurity and the electronic warfare piece? Okay, Gabe's away. Dr. Phoenix, you have anything you want to add to this from an electronic warfare piece?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm just on the phone, but I'm still listening.
Okay.
I don't really have much to add. I mean, I'm not the cybersecurity specialist here, so I think this is better left up to either you or Gabe, Mike, or if Nagon has any comments. But I'm right in this space. I'm the student, so I'll let you brothers talk.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely think the cybersecurity and that whole cyber warfare game is that's first level of this. So yeah, that's going to be heavy, and that's going to actually, I think, on some levels, actually increase. Let's just look at some of the stuff that's going on. What's your opinions about the Straits of Hormuz?
In terms of
as far as what relationship would that have with Israel and the Soviet Union? And well, I don't know why I say Soviet Union, but Russia. Excuse me, because I still see it. I still see it as a Soviet power. Unfortunately, they're certainly operating that way. But anyway, go ahead.
No, well, in regards to Israel and the Straits of Hormuz, would be that Israel has two air bases outside of Israel in the Middle East. One in Saudi Arabia and one possibly in if I remember correctly, it's either Bahrain or the UAE. So those things are that if there's going to be an attack, it's going to come for those bases. Iran and Russia are paying attention to that, and they're probably maybe they've already pinpointed it, but it's just a matter of, well, if they do strike, this is the path they're going to come. So we got to set up those electronic warfare capabilities, because they don't have any real. There is it's the only non-lethal means that they have to actually defend themselves, right? So the Strait of Hormuz becomes null and void for any sort of traffic. If there is a conflict that breaks out, I mean, they pretty much lock that place down in terms of setting up mines and other coastal batteries in case a conflict does happen.
That's what I'm talking about, as far as also with respect to electronic warfare and so forth, because that's a key area right there. If something pops off, that's what these guys are going to pop off from. This is where these guys are going to launch, are going to run from, are going to launch from. So, we have to look at what's kind of going on all around in that region, and definitely the electronic warfare game that's cybersecurity and all that. That's that's the first phase of this. So yeah, they got to be heavily involved in it, heavily involved. It's just as far as from Iran and Russia from that perspective, it's the smart move. It's what you have to. It's kind of what you have to do. Unfortunately, that's what they're doing. So yeah, cybersecurity, electronic warfare, and all the intelligence that comes around with that comes through that, the ELINT and everything else like that. That's very critical, critical in this.
All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from NASA.
Do you agree, Mike, or you disagree?
No, it's very important. I mean, this, Iran doesn't have the same amount of advanced weapons capabilities as Israel does, because Israel gets a lot of their work from United States. They've been siphoning off a lot of technologies for the last 40 years or so. So it's an unfair advantage, but if that's the only means that they have, then so be it. I don't see anything wrong with using non-lethal defenses, to keep your backyard clean.
Absolutely.
I don't see anything wrong with that. All right. This next one is from the naturalinterest.org. This Iranian commander kept secret that Israeli F-35 stealth fighters had violated Iran airspace. We just got finished talking about that. Islamic Republic of Iran Air Force Commander Brigadier General Farzad Ismaili, who had been in office since 2010, has been fired by Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei after he kept secret that Israeli Air Force F-35 stealth fighters had violated Iran's airspace. The Kuwaiti daily Al Jazeera reported on Saturday. The newspaper emphasized that it was the original media source that exposed the Israeli raids, which had taken place in March 2018. Al Jazeera cited senior Iranian military who said that only following its March report did the intelligence services of the Revolutionary Guards and Iranian intelligence ministry begin to investigate the case under Khamenei's direct orders. According to the newspaper's investigation, the IAF F-35 Adir planes penetrated Iran's airspace, circled high above Tehran, Karajak, Isfahan, Shiraz, and Bandar Abbas, and photographed Iran's air defense system. One of the sources reported that Iran's air defense system, including its Russian radar, did not detect the entry and exit of the fighter planes, and that Ismaili, hid this information from the supreme leader to cover his service failure. However, Iranian intelligence discovered that the Israeli fighter jet had carried out this sortie as a test of the possibility of an undetected attack on Iranian outposts and bases, during which they photographed those sensitive bases evading the Russian S-300 systems radar. According to Al Jazeera, Iranian intelligence received top secret information that the Israeli fighter planes have managed to photograph Iran's underground bases. Khamenei, who received the information, now suspects a cooperation between Russia and Israel, in that the Russians gave Israel the secret code of the Russian radar in Iran, according to the Kuwaiti newspaper. Khamenei fired the commander of Iran's air defense system on May 29th, replacing him with his deputy, General Alireza Sabai Fard. Israel is the first country outside the U.S. to acquire the F-35 fifth generation fighter, of which it could take up to 75. Noteworthy, Israeli F-35 deals have been severely criticized because the aircraft are far more expensive than those purchased by the U.S. Air Force, since they feature several unique and indigenous systems to satisfy Israeli Air Force operational requirements. However, the former Ministry of Defense, Avigdor Lieberman, explained that the F-35 squadrons are the pinnacle of technology and will assist the Israeli Defense Forces and Air Force in meeting the many security challenges Israel faces head-on. They are a central aspect in protecting the safety of the people of Israel along with the country's borders and even away from them. The U.S., in fact, has given Israel more military aid than any other country in the world, currently around $4 billion a year. And its laws on arms sales require that Israel always maintains military superiority in the Middle East. Israel has praised the Lockheed Martin F-35 as a game changer. All planes ordered by the IAF belong to the F-35A variant named F-35I Adir in Israel and are operated by the IAF's Golden Eagle Squadron, based in the Nevatim Air Base in the center of the country. So we were just talking about non-lethal defense and, protecting your backyard, but Israel flew into Iran. undetected. Anybody on the panel have anything they want to add to that?
That's crazy. I mean, flying into that means that that probably was a dry run to see if they can go in Iran, fly in there undetected, and you talk about some pretty heavy duty first strike capabilities, which could do a lot of damage there. Iran better they better be on top of their game, man, because Israel may be coming in looking to see what they, because if they decide there is going to be a war, they're going to make sure that Iran is not going to be able to fight too well if they can hit them and do a lot of damage inland. I don't know. That's ill. I mean, that's supreme violations of airspace. That might even be considered an act of war. Who knows? I mean,
I would consider
it. So go ahead. What are you saying?
No, I said I would consider that an act of war. I mean, to be able to photograph your defense systems, I mean, that is a massive failure of military capability.
Massive.
I mean, again, I mean, this is how, if you guys remember back to the original Gulf War in the 90s, I mean, again, they sent in the F-117 Nighthawks, and and so again, they were able to photograph all of the defense systems in Baghdad and everything, so they knew exactly how to hit and when to hit. And so, I mean, right now you have the F-35, which is the predecessor of those previous, stealth-based fighters, fighter jets. So again, I mean, I would agree with Nagone. If they were able to do that, that is a massive failure of military defense capabilities. And more importantly, since technology that they sourced from Russia wasn't even able to detect the F-35s, I mean, what does that say about Russian technology? Could they really defend against this newer stealth technology that is in the F-35?
It's kind of interesting. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it was the S-300, just to be exact.
Okay.
The S-400, that wouldn't have happened. So we know in Syria that the S-300 was used to take down the F-16 last year. Take down the Israeli F-16 over the Golan Heights.
Yeah.
So we know that it's effective, but the question is how were they, Israel able to defeat the Iranian-based system without some kind of cheat code? So if the Russians are actually helping, sorry, there's a lot of unnecessary fireworks going off.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. We can't hear him too good. We can't hear him too good.
Okay. Yeah, if the Russians are helping both sides, where they're giving Israel cheat codes and then they're giving Iran some dummy equipment, man, that's that's a big problem, man. I don't know if I would want to trust the Vladimir Putin and his guys anymore. I would have to go to China.
And if that is the case, if Russia is doing that, what would be the reason for them to give Iran dummy equipment?
Because they need good relations with Israel, unless they plan on going to war with Israel too.
So they're quietly kind of sabotaging them a little bit, which you have to look at. You have to look at that real sideways. If that's the case, and yeah, I would definitely be rolling with China after that, because if I'm purchasing any type of system that it's supposed to detect and it doesn't, I mean, it's one thing to shoot down an F-16. F-16 is late 70s, really kind of 80s.
Yeah, it's old tech.
Technology that's old technology. I mean, it's a great little plane. It's fast and highly maneuverable, but compared to what we have today to track those, those types of planes, you can knock them out pretty easy. But the new stealth, you had the first generation in the F-117, Nighthawk, and now you have the F-35 and other stuff. I mean, think about it. I mean, we have the Aurora. We have some other aircraft that are not even online for some of these other countries that are moving at Mach 7, Mach 8. even higher than that, and I have stealth technology in them as well. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with Nagel. Only other thing I would add was that they talked about how much more the U.S. was selling the F-35 to Israel, and I'm sure all the brothers are aware on the panel that the F-35 has had a troubled development since its inception. I mean, again,
Yeah,
they poured hundreds of billions into the development and manufacturing of the F-35. So again, they're giving the Israel $4 billion a year military aid, but again, they're getting it right back by
yeah.
selling the F-35s. So
And the F-35 also, it has thrust vectoring technology. Is that correct?
yes,
One
yes,
of
it
them
does.
does. One of them
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
Yeah, one of them does. The other one doesn't.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know for sure the ones that the U.S. Does. Maybe I don't know about the
Japan.
Israeli.
Yeah, the Japanese ones do too because they have the helicopter carriers that have
Yeah.
been converted into
Yeah. For the Navy, yeah, exactly. So
yeah for their navy. So
there's a naval version of that's thrust vector. Okay, all right. Yeah, this is not good, man. I ran not good, fellas. That's not good. That's not good. And if Israel's running dry runs up in there like that,
well,
mm.
I got to think that this brigadier man, he got his head chopped off. Yeah, I don't even think he's alive at this point. I think they chopped this dude's head clean straight the fuck off.
Yeah, I
I
would
would,
think so.
I would have probably done the same thing. Keep in mind this is Iran, so we know that Ayatollah Khomeini has supreme say so. So
Yeah.
he,
Yeah.
he he's the rule of
Him and the
law.
mullahs. Yeah. Yeah.
The thing is, if he knew about it, why? How did he know about it? Even with all the equipment, if Israel flew in there undetected, and you're telling me that hey, give me 1 second. If Israel flew in there undetected, and the brigadier, how did the brigadier know this? What radar system was he using? Because the radar system, according to the article supplied by the Russians, did not detect it. So how did he get this information? I'd love to know that. Maybe he used satellite, but I find that to be questionable.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, again, that's a damn good question. I mean, yeah.
What do you think about that, Nagon? How would they know that? Like, how would they determine? Some human beings on the ground cannot see a fighter jet at what 26,000, 25,000 feet up.
There's no way you can see it. In fact, you can't even hear if it's flying supersonic. So you won't even hear it. And by the time you even hear boom, it'll be long gone. So, but I
Yeah.
don't know, Mike. That is a. I don't know, Mike.
This happened a year ago.
I don't know, Mike. Man, this is highly suspect. My boy, highly suspect. Highly suspect, dude. They said this guy's head must be gone by now, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, they took him to the damn gallows or something.
Yeah, this is highly suspect.
And I mentioned earlier before this article that Israel has two air bases inside the Middle East, outside of Tel Aviv. I know there's definitely one in Saudi Arabia, and there might be one in Bahrain, and the other one could possibly be inside Oman, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly. But if they're going to launch an attack, they're not going to come from Israel. They're coming close.
yeah, they're
There's also
gonna definitely come close. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I know they have a military outpost in Kurdistan, northern Iraq. So they've been operating there as well. Um, this is a big game changer because if there's going to be a conflict, Iran is screwed.
I was thinking Iran was ready, but this article where you've got Israel sneaking in and out, that means if this has been caught once, that means they've done it on a few occasions. Not good.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, I think this kind of goes to the whole, the U.S. has been accusing China of intellectual property theft for years through, through cyber attacks and hacking and such like that. So again, they went after the folks that had the best technology. As everyone knows, that the U.S. invests far more than any other country in military technology. So again, it is not really surprising to me that that they would build fighters with this capability. So,
well, the thing is that Russia has been able to detect F-35s as well with their S-400 and S-500 system. If I remember correctly, the S-500 system isn't even outside of Russia yet, but they've been able to detect them inside Eastern Europe. So the Russians are covering their ass, but if you're Iran, I'd be highly worried about getting into a conflict anytime soon because, and that probably is a justification for them to go and get nuclear weapons. I mean, as an assurance that,
yeah,
well, even if you do have an F-35, we'll spike the ball right here. It'll be game over for everybody.
yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a deterrent method. I mean, obviously, everyone's known for quite some time. Israel is a nuclear power, as much as they deny it, but everyone's known that. And again, Israel has demonstrated over the decades that they are the premier military power in the region. So, I mean, it's only fitting that Iran would pursue nuclear means as a form of deterrent. So,
yeah, not good, man. Not good.
Not good at all. Not good at all. So,
all right, let me get to this next article from RT. Russian Ministry of Defense names naval officers who perished in deep sea subfire. The 14 officers who died fighting a disastrous fire on a Russian deep water research vessel has been named by the Russian Defense Ministry. The crew have sacrificed their lives to save fellow officers and save the submersible. I'm not going to read their names off because I think what's more important is the action for this article. The tragic incident on the submersible occurred in the Russian territorial waters of the Barents Sea and was first acknowledged by the military on Tuesday. The submersible safely returned to port after the disaster. The exact vessel type, the total number of sailors aboard, and the extent of the damage to the vessel, as well as the cause of the incident, remain classified. Early on Tuesday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the information about the vessel and the whole incident is absolutely classified data that won't be disclosed to the general public in full. So, it's a submersible. They're not considering it a full submarine. This is Russia's deep sea weapon. Basically, it cuts communication cables for the internet and voice for telephony. And for whatever reason, this thing caught fire. They say it's nuclear. I don't doubt that it is. But I find that to be interesting that these guys had a fire on board. I would have thought that at this point in the game, all the training exercises that goes on submersibles, on submarines and things of that nature. This stuff is practiced day in, day out, and that they should have had a better grip on this. Meinel is a former Navy guy on the Black Brain Trust. He probably could speak more to that because he's been on he's been on submarines before throughout his career. So this is interesting. Russia is supposed to be this advanced military, and for whatever reason, they're still having submarines fall to the bottom of the ocean. This got to be at least the fourth or fifth one in the last 50 years Nicole?
yeah, yes, sir. So I don't know why they're dropping subs down there, but this is do you suspect it may be sabotage? What could potentially be going on with that? Because losing those subs and potential broken arrows coming out of there and everything else like that, I can't. This is beyond comprehension in some ways.
Lionel and myself had covered this probably about a year or so ago, and Russia has a problem with their navy in terms of ageism, or aging. A lot of their officers are still going into the deep 50s, early 60s at best, and they don't have enough millennials who are willing to go into the navy at this point. When the Soviet Union collapsed, so did their industrialization for building warships and other maritime craft. And so a lot of those unemployed um, unemployed seamen and whatnot who work on these submarines and warships, they ended up going west of Europe to go find work. And so they have a massive human capital, human resource issue on their side. And I think what's happening here is they don't always have enough resources available to attend to some of these old submarines. Now, they have done great stuff in the past in terms of spoofing NATO, popping up in the middle of these flotillas and stuff like that. They have proven that they've done that in the past, but for whatever reason, they seem to be losing submarines every presidential cycle. If I remember correctly, man, they've been losing subs since the Soviet Union, which is terrible.
The Soviet Union was losing subs when they were the Soviet Union and had quite a bit of rubles going into their military and their navy. They were losing subs then. Losing subs now. So I don't know. Of course we're all outsiders, but something doesn't seem right. Something seems,
Yeah.
and maybe the answer's what you're saying. But was that the same situation back when the Soviet Union was in full swing? Was that the same? Older. I'm sorry, it was just a call. Was coming through. Was that? Did they have a lot of older sub commanders then? Was that situation then? I don't know.
No, I think they had a full. I think they had a full, regiment or human resources back then. But I think what happened when the Soviet Union collapsed was that a lot of those guys who would have been replacements for those older senior guys never followed through. They kind of left. Once the Berlin Wall collapsed, those guys took off. But I get your point though. Going back then as to why they were thinking back then, I think they were just shoddy designs back then. Just really shoddy designs.
Yeah, maybe they were shoddy designs. I have some other questions about that as well, but that's possible. I suspect. So I suspect there was some degree of sabotage in there. I think there was some real funky stuff going on. Like I suspected there is now. They lost a sub. How long ago was that? The last sub they lost? That was early 2000s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
There's a rumor that they may have had a malfunction as well in 2007 or 2008 or something like that.
Yeah, and this one had nuclear weapons, so they had to go in and get nuclear. They had to pick up some nuclear, some missiles, they had weapons. Those things had weapons on them, man. Those things had weapons, serious weapons.
There's an interesting.
Anyway, go ahead.
There's an interesting movie called oh man, what's the name of that movie now? It just came out last year with Lionel and myself had saw it last year. I can't remember the name of it now. But it talks about kidnapping the Russian president and bringing him on to an American submarine and all the submarine warfare, and it was a pretty dead accurate movie. I'm not sure how they were able to get so much accuracy out of it, but the idea that a Russian sub can go down, it doesn't surprise me because a lot of the components that is necessary to keep those subs up and going have to be imported. They're running out of some of that aluminum that most subs use, most advanced subs use, and they're having to reduced themselves down to steel, other low grades of steel. So there's a lot of things that they've made sacrifices on in terms of submarine design, which is a shame. And the recent sub that they designed last year carries half the fleet of an American equivalent sub. I think it's they're down to like 30 or 35 guys for the same sub that same class sub that the Americans have, which would have something like 80 to 100 guys on it.
So in many respects, when you really sit down and you think about it, just what I'm saying. I mean, we're just only getting a fairly limited view, but it seems like to me, Russia and these guys, it probably wouldn't be within their interest to go to war. I think
they're not ready.
Yeah, I think maybe some of our generals are seeing that. I think what they might have is they might be able to hit certain strategic targets that could create some problems, but a real war, I don't know if that's a game they really want to play. I don't know if that's a game that we really want to play. But I'm of the mindset I don't think that's a game that would potentially work out in their favor. Is all I have to say.
Yeah. The name of the movie is called Hunter Killer. It has Common the rapper and Gerard Butler. It's a really good movie if you ever get a chance to see it. It came out last year. But to your point, Russia's land warfare capabilities is top notch. But in terms of their maritime security and maritime operations, they are pretty weak in those areas for good reason. They're, like I said before, the industrialization of their sea vessels and whatnot are dismal because they don't have enough human capital to actually build out warships. So they're working with South Korea, who has mastered oil tankers and other large vessels for that very reason, that they can probably design an oil tanker into an aircraft carrier for dirt cheap money. So that's what they're looking at. So they're outsourcing this stuff now to other countries. I mean, they outsource 2 of their Minstrel class helicopter landing craft carriers to France a few years ago, and the CIA broke into the facility and stole all the equipment out of the warships and left them null and void based on the sanctions that from 2014 when they took Crimea. And that was their justification for the United States to go in there and actually seize those the equipment of those warships. And then they ended up getting transferred to Egypt. So Russia has a big problem in terms of sea vessel development. They are relying on third-party sources now. Anyways, DE Raptor, what's going on, bro? You have anything you want to add to any of the discussion that we've had?
Good morning, everybody. Good. Well, for me, it's morning. Sorry. Good evening. Yeah. I sent you guys an article yesterday. But I sent you guys an email. It says Chinese thoughts on Russian technology. Anyway, what this thing began when Gorbachev made a deal with the West. And if you guys remember that the West took all of their nuclear physicists, all of the people who built their submarines, the war machines, everything that the Russians had, the West took, just like how they did to Germany. And serious, even South Korea and Japan took Russian scientists. So when Putin came into office, he decided on a whole new plan. And he started building the nuclear, working with the nuclear weapons that he had. And he made 2 plans. One, if we get attacked, the whole world will feel the pain. We're going to put nuclear weapons on every continent. We're going to fire on you whether you attack us or not. And then he built, like you guys said, they have a great army. And that army is, if the Europeans come across the border, they're going to get slaughtered. That's the idea. However, the Russians have some new equipment that they're building as far as submarines. And from what I'm hearing from people that I know, I listen to around the world, like that the Russians were testing one of these, three of these submarines. There's one small sub that carries a type of mine that can, and we talked about this mine before, this mine can sit for years and wait for the specific ship that it is tuned to. They can program this mine to attack a European warship, a British warship, a French warship, because they have this specific signature. All of them have a signature. This was one of the submarines involved. The other sub involved was what they had shown the US. They said, we're going to put this off the coast of Florida. And when we detonate it, the whole of Florida is going to be under 15 feet of water. That's the second one that they were testing. And supposedly something went wrong. And the captains of these submarine captains, there was 7 of them that got killed. So they were being trained on how to use these, how to deploy this equipment. And there was a larger sub, one of the biggest subs that the Soviet made, that can carry both of these subs on that one sub. And somehow something went wrong, and there was an explosion, and it kills a lot of people. But the Soviet Union Russia is building a whole new fleet, and with new technology, I mean, you're going to get accidents. It depends on how fast you're trying to push your technology. And if you try to go too fast, which Putin is trying to go very fast, because what's happening is that the U.S. that him and the Chinese, they sense that the U.S. is I don't know if you remember the history of Rome. When Rome was falling, they had armies all over Europe. And everywhere they were marching armies from one place to other to put down rebellions. And that's what the United States is doing right now. And right now, the Soviet and the Chinese are trying to build as fast as they can to checkmate the US. They already got the EU checkmated. And they're trying to get the US checkmate, because without the US to kind of lift up the Europeans can't. So so you see this deal with China. People don't understand this thing that what's name did in North Korea. The first president to walk across the North Korean border, he went to Kim. Kim didn't come to him. People don't see that.
Yeah.
That when he talked to Z, no president of the United States goes through this. People don't understand the U.S. history. No president of the United States did what Donald Trump did in North Korea. And it might seem like, it might seem like, yeah, they're making friends. But who forced Donald Trump into that position? That's the question you got to ask, So there's a lot of things going around. But as far as that Russian sub accident, there was more to it than meets the eye. And this is a top secret program that they got. And this super weapon that they're building, supposedly they have 2 or 3 of them that they're testing already. And but the war submarine, not the hypersonic missiles. There's a submarine. It's a torpedo that is almost as big as an attack class submarine. It's almost as big as an attack class submarine. And this thing can create a wave that they are that the Russians say that, you know what, we will do it. And that's the military that Putin's built. Because like you said, the Russians don't have the manpower to man their armies. They don't have. If they had like 200 or 300 million people, then the U.S. would have a lot of problems. But you see the Russians pushing the technology, but they're going after cyber. They're building weapons that they say, look, we're gonna attack you no matter where you are if you're on the other side. And Putin said that in his speech. He said, we're going to attack the people who attack us, and we're going to attack the people who sent you. So that's the kind of military that he's building now. And that actually came out of this program that they are building. As far as that jet with the Israelis going on, that oh boy, there's a lot to that we talk about, but I don't want to go back to that.
Yeah, let me get to this article. Thank you for that. This one is from Politico.com. Russia beaten U.S. in race for global influence, Pentagon study says. The U.S. is ill-equipped to counter the increasingly brazen political warfare Russia is waging to undermine democracies. The Pentagon and independent strategists warn in a detailed assessment that happens to echo much bipartisan criticism of President Donald Trump's approach to Moscow. The more than 150-page white paper prepared for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and shared with Politico says the U.S. is still underestimating the scope of Russia's aggression, which includes the use of propaganda and disinformation to sway public opinions across Europe, Central Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The study also points to the dangers of a growing alignment between Russia and China, which share a few of the United States' international alliances and an affinity for authoritarian stability. Its authors contend that disarray at home is hampering U.S. efforts to respond, saying America lacks the kind of compelling story it used to win the Cold War. The study doesn't offer any criticism of Trump, but it comes amid continued chafing by security hawks in both parties who have objected to the president's repeated sights at U.S. alliances in Europe and Asia. Public affection for authoritarian leaders like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, and his habit of scoffing at the evidence that Russia interfered in the 2016 election. A grinning Trump added to that pattern Friday at Osaka, Japan, where he got a chuckle out of Putin by admonishing him, "Don't meddle in the election, President." In interviews with Politico, other Russia watchers supported the reports, warning that the U.S. needs to up its game. Russia is attacking Western institutions in ways more shrewd and strategically discreet than many realize, said Natalia Arno, president of the Free Russia Foundation, an anti-Putin Washington think tank that recently completed its own study of Russian efforts to undermine the West. The attacks may seem more subtle and craftier, but they are every bit as destructive as governments are influenced. Laws are changed, legal decisions are undermined, law enforcement is thwarted, and military intervention is guised. The unclassified strategic multi-layer assessment marks a clear warning from the military establishment to civilian leaders about a national security threat that strategists fear, if left unchecked, could ultimately lead to armed conflict. In this environment, economic competition, influence campaigns, paramilitary actions, cyber intrusions, and political warfare will likely become more prevalent, writes Navy Rear Admiral Jeffrey Saruko, the Joint Chiefs Deputy Director for Global Operations, in the preface to the report. Such confrontations increase the risk of misperception and miscalculation between powers with significant military strength, which may increase the risk of armed conflict. The Pentagon paper, which has not been widely disseminated, assesses Russia's intentions in an attempt to understand what drives its strategy, outlines a range of malign activities attributed to Russia in regions as diverse as Africa and the Arctic, and lays out ways the United States could strengthen its response. Among other steps, it recommends that the State Department spearhead more aggressive influence options, including sowing divisions between Russia and China. I just want to stop here because I don't think that we need to read any more, because it's already been proven that the Russians did not meddle in the elections of the United States government or the United States campaigns. and there was no evidence for it cited. Before John McCain died, he sat on a panel at a hearing and questioned the validity of alleged Russian interference. And I believe it was Comey who said we don't have any actual evidence of Russian interference. And if I remember correctly, McCain said we don't need evidence. We know they did it, just based off of that. So it's a level of racism that has reared its head in terms of foreign policy, in terms of how they deal with the Russians and the Chinese. Dr. Phoenix, you have anything you want to add to that?
Again, this has always been the MO of John McCain specifically. I mean, John, back in the '08 elections, John McCain had that, he did that little famous little campaign speech where he sang "Bomb, Bomb, Bomb Iran." So I mean, again, this is not really surprising coming from him. Also, too, I mean, again, these are ways that the U.S. has always used to try to undermine, its military and political enemies. So I mean, this is just standard. This is just standard operating procedure as far as I'm concerned.
Nicole? I think Nicole's away right now. D.E. Raptor, you have anything you want to add to this?
This is a standard like Doc said, this is a standard operating procedure for all countries who have power, some measure of power. They're gonna where they can, they're going to use it, and they're not going to hold back unless it benefits them. So Russia is doing the same thing that we do. We might do it using, like, the U.S. uses a lot of money to do this, while the Russians don't use a lot of money to do it. The Russians embark on a long-term plan, but the U.S. goes from year to year, and if you don't stay in line, they chop you up. The Russians will walk away from you, and then you come back to them later. So that's what people do. It's like the Russians pulled out of Africa after the Soviet Union fell. Now they're going back into Africa. This is not a direct attack on America, but it is Russia going in to secure what they see as their part of the world. They have to have some say in what goes on, and they were doing
it. Well,
yeah, I was like, go ahead, brother.
No, go right ahead, Dr. Phoenix.
No, I was just gonna say that again, we talked about this, I think, last week with what was going on, and I can't remember. But anyhow, the point is that essentially the U.S. has not made itself any friends. I mean, the last 2 decades or so, especially, the U.S. has not done itself any favors on the world stage. So I mean, there's just a lot of folks that, again, U.S. might be the preeminent military power in the world. However, there's a lot of loopholes in this foreign policy that has allowed Russia to essentially come underneath the U.S. and completely undermine their efforts. And given that the U.S. has not done itself any favors in regards to forging partnerships with countries that, again, cite their wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, and plus the financial crisis of 2008. Yeah, the U.S. hasn't done itself any favors.
Nicole? I think Nicole's away right now. All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from CNBC.com. Russia's Vladimir Putin says liberalism has outlived its purpose. Russian President Vladimir Putin believes the dominant Western ideology since the end of World War II has become obsolete. In an interview with the Financial Times published Friday, the Russian president said liberalism has now come into conflict with what people around the world want. Liberals cannot simply dictate anything to anyone, just like they have been attempting to do over the recent decades, Putin said, as world leaders gathered in Osaka, Japan for a 2-day G20 summit. Putin criticized German Chancellor Angela Merkel's decision to admit more than 1 million refugees to Germany in 2015, predominantly from war-torn Syria, as a cardinal mistake. But the de facto leader of Russia for almost 2 decades praised President Donald Trump for trying to stop the flow of migrants and drugs from Mexico. The liberal idea presupposes that nothing needs to be done. The migrants can kill, plunder, rape with impunity because their rights as migrants have to be protected, Putin told the newspaper. Sounds like the manosphere to me. Every crime must have its punishment. The liberal idea has become obsolete. It has come into conflict. It does sound like the manosphere. Every crime must have its punishment. The liberal idea has become obsolete and has come into conflict with the interests of the overwhelming majority of the population. Donald Tusk, the president of the European Council, which comprises of the heads of state from EU nations, flatly rejected Putin's argument. He told reporters he strongly disagreed with the Russian president. Whoever claims that liberal democracy is obsolete also claims that freedoms are obsolete, that the rule of law is obsolete, and that the human rights are obsolete, Tusk said Friday, before adding that these were essential and vibrant values for Europeans. Tusk joked that jet lag had allowed him to read the Financial Times' entire interview with Putin. His rebuttal of Putin's argument appeared to fit the tone of this year's G20 meeting, where leaders are expected to clash over trade, foreign policy, and the intensifying climate crisis. So, Vladimir Putin says liberalism has outlived its purpose. I wonder if we can say the same thing in the black community and in the manosphere itself. I just want to read the quote again. The liberal idea presupposes that nothing needs to be done, that migrants can kill, plunder, and rape with impunity because their rights as migrants have to be protected, Putin told the newspaper. So it just sounds like it just sounds like a playbook right out of the matriarchy. What do you think about this, Dr. Phoenix?
I think, in all honesty, I think, we've seen this since the war in Afghanistan, since the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan began. I mean, you've seen countries, and Syria as well. I mean, you've seen countries from the U.S. to Germany, France. They've let in a significant number of immigrants, and with many of them being Arab and Islamic immigrants, and so. And as a result, you've seen this rise of nationalism in these countries. I'm sorry. Sorry.
We'll give Dr. Phoenix a few seconds to come back. I think he has to step away for a second.
No, just a jet flying overhead. Sorry. Yeah. So again, you've seen the rise of nationalism in these respective countries. I mean, here in the U.S., obviously, France, Germany, and so again, and for the most part, I think this plays right into the hands of Russia, given that Russia has always been a very nationalist type of country with a very nationalist focus and government that is ran in such a manner. So again, I think this very much plays into them, into how Russia's always been ran, and two, I mean, as it relates to the black manosphere, my thing is, I do like a few of the cats in the black manosphere. However, I think part of the problem is, again, we don't have a lot of balance here. there's not a lot of balance, and I think that's really the gist of what's happening, is that you're seeing you're seeing the pendulum swing back the other way towards balancing, just sort of this the policies that have been set forth by the NATO powers over the last 7 or 8 decades almost now. So again, you're just seeing that pendulum swing back towards, folks, the belief in nationalism, and sort of the focusing on your own. And again, as that relates to the Black Manosphere, I do like some of the characters, but I do think that there is no balance in things that happen. And again, there needs to be a better, more nuanced conversation about, things that should be happening in Manosphere, but we know that doesn't happen. And two, just in regards to the foreign policy aspect, things should be very much. I mean, this is just more the Cold War tactics. If you.
DE Raptor, you have anything you want to add to this?
Putin couldn't support Putin. There's other ways that Putin could have shown his support for Donald Trump, but I mean, he just came out and said Donald Trump was right to keep the migrants out, which Donald Trump and his supporters, the people who support him, guess what? He came right out and said it. He supported Donald Trump with that statement, and everybody could see it. Well, not everybody could see it. The average black man will see it. Black woman wouldn't see it. But that's a direct support for Donald Trump and his not foreign policy, but his domestic policy, which people in the U.S. are voting on next year. So I'm looking at that thing and I'm laughing. It's funny to me, you know what I'm saying? But this is the Don says don't meddle in our elections. I would have laughed. So, man, please.
Well, the thing is, we're moving to a more conservative sort of society. You can see the shift, and even in the United States, Roe v. Wade, affirmative actions on the table now, right? 2020, after 2020, this may end up going away. So they're moving back to this sort of very conservative sort of society and no longer liberal. The pushback, with the Proud Boys and these other far right groups, Richard Spencer wanting to kick out Indians, who come from the subcontinent of India. He wants to kick those guys out and give their IT jobs to white men who are not even qualified for it. This is the sort of society that they're trying to move into, and maybe he's right. Dr. Phoenix.
Yeah. Look at it.
Go ahead, brother.
Oh, sorry. Look at it this way: China, which is our I don't know, biggest adversary. They're the ones who's challenging the U.S. to the throne, and they are, I mean, far, 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 far to the right than the United States. That's the kind of society that China is building, and you can't compete if you have an open society like the U.S. You can't compete with Chinese society, which is you can't compete with the Chinese, because if you look at Huawei, for instance, we are trying to get to subdue Huawei so that our tech firms can get some of that fighting. We can get part of the market. But that Huawei is the Chinese society. That's why the government behind Huawei. Because American society is behind any one company from the U.S. The U.S. government will support all the companies, but there's not one company that the U.S. will say, "Hey, look, we got to challenge the Chinese, and we're gonna back you up in your challenge. Anything you want, we got." That's what China does. Russia is doing the same thing. If you look at the Russian companies, you'll see that Russia is doing the same thing. Putin said the other day, we're gonna have our own internet. Because if the U.S. shut down the internet, guess what? So we're gonna have our own internet. So we're gonna build on that. And Russia is the same conservative kind of country. U.S. can't compete. If Russia had say 250, 275 million people, close to what the United States have, the United States would be close to on the brink of falling over. That's how things are now. So the U.S. has to change. And Putin is saying, "Hey, I agree with you, Don. Do what you got to do." You know.
Historically, the most successful societies tended to be conservative and nationalist in nature. So, again, Russia has always been a country that prided itself on this conservative nationalist uh, uh, politics and just hierarchy in general. The U.S., we saw a shift in from nationalism, although I think the shift from nationalism, not nationalism, conservatism to more liberalism, I think it benefited Black people to an extent. However, one of the brothers in the chat talked about Black people are conservative. The problem with that, Black people are conservative in name only, but not practice. Because if we were, we would have more of a nationalist mindset, and then we wouldn't be dealing with so many of the social issues and ills that plague us to this day. Part of the reason why Black folks have been unable to build anything is because we don't truly think like a nationalist conservative society. Nationalist conservative societies, by definition, think about put themselves first. They put
Right.
they put the needs of themselves, of the group, of the collective first.
Right.
And
Being
again,
African.
yeah. So again, that's what you're seeing now. You talked about Richard Spencer, the Proud Boys, the alt right, the rise of this, what we would call, neo-Nazism, if you will. Again, what is this about? This is about preserving the white male position within American society. And so again, these movements, this manner of thinking, is all about self-preservation. And again, to go back, I think the brother's name is Chief Rocka, to go back to his statement, if Black folks thought more like that, the world, America would look a lot different for us today.
Mhm. Definitely. A lot of Black people are not. Well, I guess you could say that they're conservative in the way that they're going for reparations, but you're right. In their day-to-day operations, it's very, very liberal. It's I can kill you and gold teeth in my mouth, and I cook people, and I do this and I do that. I'm the greatest of all topics, and then you get you get goose eggs, you get donuts out of these guys. They're not exactly producing anything tangible for the collective. So there's nothing really conservative about them. They're very liberal. They plunder, they steal, they do whatever they want. And there's people out there that support that. And then they turn back around and talk about building this sort of community with people who want to chop your head off at the next opportunity that they can. I've seen good Black men who work 9-to-5 jobs, have degrees, get attacked by some of these reptiles out here, and people will side with the reptile before they side with the brother who's a victim. He's going about his way, just minding his own business. He gets sucker punched in the street, just coming home from work. And people support that. They say, well, he should have fought back, or he should have had a strong jaw. And I'm scratching my head. I'm saying, what do you mean?
Yeah. Again, there's another commenter in the chat, Space Cowboy 776. Yeah, they may have been true in the 1930s to an extent. However, we're talking about this. We're almost 100 years later now.
Mm-hmm.
We're coming up. It'd be what 2020 next year. So we're almost we're almost 90 years out almost. So again, what Black society looked like back in the 1930s is not what it looks like in the 21st century. Again, We have backslid on every single metric in American society. We are either at the bottom or damn near at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. A permanent
We
underclass.
don't. Yeah, we don't produce productive people. We don't produce critical thinkers. We don't produce scientists. We don't produce people who are prepared to be industrialists and survive and bring black folks and push black folks forward in the 21st century. So again, typically societies that have been very successful throughout history were conservative, were nationalists in nature. Again, going back to what you talked about earlier about Israel, how do you think Israel has been able to come to power? Because they completely think about themselves. They're 100% insular.
Yeah,
They are
survival is
myopic.
really,
Yes.
Yeah, but Dr. Phoenix, one of the problems we have is that women in a society are going to produce men who are going to take care of them. You understand? They're going to follow they're going to whisper in your ear. Look, yeah, you're my son. You're my sweetheart. You're going to take care of me. I go, forget about your dad. Your dad is this useless piece of trash that I just slept with to have you. You know, and that's the society that's been built since the 70s. So that's going to affect everything that we do. Is going to affect our whole lifestyle, and
mhm,
everything. We're going to be focused on the women, and once the women are controlled from outside, then
mhm,
we're following the outside force that's controlling women.
mhm.
I mean,
And
again,
the women think that they have this great thing going because their white sisters are saying, "Come on, you're with us. We're sisters. You're part of the gang." Until we can't, when you start standing and say we can't control you, we can't tell you what to do, then you're not part of the gang. Once we get what we want, you're on your own. And black women don't notice that. They keep falling for that rope a dope trick all the time.
I think as a
Yeah,
whole, black people fell for that. Again, I can certainly, I agree. Yeah, that is true of black women, but I also say that is also true of black men. Again, we have failed as a society to produce functional men who are able to lead black society to a state of prosperity. Again, for the last since the beginning of this year, what has dominated the headlines? Reparation, ADOS. And again, as someone who has a background in healthcare and biomedical research, again, this is I 100% believe in it because why? Because I know the effect of what systemic racism, white supremacy has done to black people. Obviously, I see it on a regular basis. However, the fundamental problem is that going to the statement, again, when we're talking about the society's values, women are the vanguard of a society's values. If you want to know where society's values are at, just look at its women.
Well,
So
see,
again,
they always say society can never rise higher than the moral position of its women. But as far as we're failing to produce black men who this, I think that's more of a YouTube kind of a lot of talk. I see plenty of brothers out in the community and education and so forth who are providing a lot of leadership. I think the thing about it is a lot of it's not being spoken about. I even look at people like this Pastor Dowell here on YouTube, who's got, you
yeah, I
know, you
actually
know,
watch some of his videos.
you, he's kind of a wild guy, but he's like, man, we take it a little by the horns. We're starting our own game. We're not out here playing. It's a black man thing. We,
I think I don't mean to cut you off, Nagon. I think what Dr. Phoenix is referring to, and we've talked about this on the Brain Trust many times since our inception.
mm,
We don't produce the same amount that other communities produce, right? There's no culture, there's no culture. There's no immediate culture to say you're going to do this because it's in the best interest from a nationalist standpoint for your people. Whereas what we've told, what black women have been told, and they've been handed down from a legacy standpoint, is to not depend on black men and to, you know, go do for yourself. That's a very liberal position to take in terms of building the community.
And look how they're running around like chickens without their heads. You know, like chickens with their heads cut off. I mean, it's ridiculous. So yeah, you know, I think, you know, so much of this, you know, the whole liberal structure and all what we're talking about has promoted people kind of to kind of run amok. And you know, I see a lot of brothers basically kind of stepping off from a lot of these women and kind of moving kind of on their own volition in some ways. And you know, we need to link back. We need to link back up with leadership. But you know, if you're going to lead, you have to have people who also want to follow. And I don't know. I don't. You know, these women say they want to follow, but I don't.
Yeah,
I don't see.
like
I don't see a lot of that.
I heard you yesterday on the Brother Obsidian's panel, Nagon, and I thought it was pretty interesting what you said, and I agree with everything you said. You know, I was my point is, and I think the brother Mike V, he spoke.
You heard me on Obsidian yesterday?
Yeah,
What did you think?
I thought you was right on the money, and that was kind of what I was going at, was that what Mike V said, which is that there's no real balance here. We produce brothers, but again, brothers like those of us on this panel, even the brothers in the chat. I mean, again, we're sort of the minority here.
Yeah,
and I know plenty of brothers, man. I've met plenty of I met a brother years ago when I was in Morocco, when I was living in Morocco, who he used to play defensive end for the Atlanta Falcons. He opened the very first TGI Fridays in Rabat, which is the capital of Morocco. And
wow.
yeah, and he was this was a big cat. This cat was probably like 6'9", like 300 pounds, and this dude gave me a hug, damn near crushed me. But again, he had a business partner. He had a Moroccan guy that was his business partner. But when him and I met, and it was me and a couple other brothers that met with him, and we were just sitting down, just chopping it up, and he was giving us all kinds of game about about opening up, just going to other countries and starting businesses. But again, brothers like him were the rarity. And again, even brothers like us, we're the exception. We're not the norm, and that's really what I'm getting at. It's not to say that we don't produce brothers that are like us. It's just as to what Mike said before, we're not producing enough relative to other groups of people.
We don't even have a culture of that, right? Our culture is mostly centered around a very liberal position. I think Black Gnostics in the chat mentioned gynocracy, and the gynocracy seems to rob Black men of their ingenuity, their intellectual capacity, their own masculinity, their own sexuality. It's all seems to be hijacked and robbed by whoever the dominant group is, and you know who your dominant group is, or who leads the community when you can't criticize them.
I would agree with that. I would agree with exactly what B just more said. I agree 100% with that. Again, if your major function in life is to chase the attention and affection of the opposite sex, again, as men, again, what do we have? We just got a bunch of guys on autopilot. Again, even listening to Nagon yesterday on Obsidian's panel. Once again, I've heard Obsidian talk about brothers getting their stuff together, getting their money right. I've heard some other brothers in the manosphere talk about it. But again, when those conversations come up, it's crickets. You get a lot of pushback. I've heard brothers on Obsidian's panel talk about how it's hard to make 50 G's in a year in this country. I don't even know how the hell that. I don't even know what the hell planet you're on when you're saying stuff like that.
Yeah, promiscuity has taken the place of the modern Black male in terms of their compass, right? Which direction they're going to be going. So it's not uncommon to see a 40-plus-year-old male living under the supervision of his female counterpart in a relationship. And guys are taking pride in that. And so when you try to talk about building a community, I don't think you're going to be using that Black male as human capital to build anything. I mean, he's skillless, underskilled, undereducated, lacks literacy in major fourth industrialized economies, emerging markets. just not really well versed and worldly explored. And it's unfortunate that that's what's being promoted. He has colorful dreads. His jeans are really skinny. He raps really good. Gold teeth in his mouth. He cooks people. He's the greatest of all topics. I just don't understand why people are making it out to seem, people are making it out to seem as if, we're talking, yeah. He might be cannibalizing them. I don't know. I don't. What I'm saying here.
And when you speak about a brother like like we're kind of alluding to, the gynocracy is running strong with a brother like that, because that's programming him as well. So it's pretty scary. You see. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, let me get to this next article because we only got so much time left. All right, this one is from Voice of America News.com. Deadly Libya bombing may be war crime. Span this out. The bombing in Libya's capital that killed at least 44 people, with some reports saying as many as 55, and injured more than 130 on Tuesday night, may amount to a war crime, according to United Nations and envoy in Tripoli. Outside of the suburban Tripoli detention center early Wednesday, survivors watched investigators pick through the rubble after a long night outside of barely any food and water. We just want peace, said one Somali woman, taking cover under a tree as investigators searched for bodies well into the afternoon. We went from Somalia to Yemen, then to Sudan, and then came here. This is just like Somalia. As the morgue in the Libyan capital, bodies were wrapped and prepared for forensic examination, while injured people in the hospital were treated, some barely conscious. Survivors said the attack occurred around 11:30 p.m. Tuesday, and that they had regularly heard drones hovering over the detention compound in recent weeks. At the beginning, we heard faraway clashes. Then we heard this strong bomb, said Saddam, an 18-year-old from Sudan. What a name to have. Who had been detained for a year after being caught attempting to cross the Mediterranean Sea to Europe. We were banging on the doors, and the security people came and let us out, and we saw the building on fire. He said. Tripoli officials attributed the attack to the forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar, a strong man who leads the military in eastern Libya. Haftar's forces have been locked in a battle for 3 months with the forces loyal to the internationally backed government in Tripoli. They are fighting for control of the city and the future of the Libyan government. The war has now killed about 700 people and displaced 94,000. Last week, after Tripoli forces captured a strategic town, Haftar's forces threatened retaliation. Amnesty International says its research indicates there is a weapons storehouse near the destroyed detention center. This deadly attack, which struck a detention center where at least 600 refugees and migrants were trapped in detention with no means of escape, in whose location was known to all warring parties, must be independently investigated as a war crime. Magdalena Murabi, Deputy Middle East and North Africa Director at Amnesty International, said in a statement Wednesday. The organization blamed the attackers for potentially deliberately targeting civilians. Amnesty also pointed to those who housed the detainees near what could be a military target, and also increasingly restrictive European migration policies that endanger refugees determined to flee to safety at any cost. Amnesty called the policies callous. The United States strongly condemned the abhorrent attack on the facility in Tajora and called for peace. The tragic and needless loss of life, which impacted one of the most vulnerable populations, underscores the urgent need for all Libyan parties to de-escalate fighting in Tripoli and return to the political process, which is the only viable path to lasting peace and stability in Libya, said department spokesperson Morgan Ortegas in a statement. So, for those of you in the chat that don't know what's going on here, is that these are black people that actually were killed. These are melanated people. Khalifa Haftar is a traitor to Muammar Gaddafi and became a U.S. citizen. He returned to Libya in 2011 after Muammar Gaddafi was assassinated, and his son, with the intent to actually go in and try to take over the country, which proved to be much more challenging. There seems to be an infatuation with killing melanated people in Libya now. Gaddafi had been the only Arab leader in the world to ever apologize for slavery and pay reparations to those who were affected by it through land reclamations, as well as building houses for these people. They had a higher income per capita than anybody in Africa at the time. They were actually living a good life over there in terms of the middle class. So with that being said, there seems to be this, like I said before, an infatuation with killing melanated people in Libya. They set these people up, they put them inside of an aircraft hangar and left them in there. And then one of the allied forces of Khalifa Haftar, who has air power, dropped a smart bomb onto that complex. And it could have been the UAE. It could have been Blackwater. Blackwater actually has an air base or a makeshift air base in Libya backing up Khalifa Haftar in terms of air power. So they use these drones. I'm not sure what kind of drones they're using. They don't seem to be all that sophisticated. I think they're just Predator drones. And they are basically bombing these targets and doing just like they did in maybe Fallujah.
I just want to know,
Anybody else?
Gaddafi's son, who the one who had the bald head, I don't know, kind of
Yep.
smooth talking cat. Whatever happened to him? I know that
He got released out of jail.
He's released?
He released him last year. He was released out of jail, and he's supposed to be running for president of Libya. The problem is that this is all fractured apart, and they're worried that but the country could be split into three different states. Literally 3 different states. The internationally supported piece, then you have Khalifa Haftar, and then you have the other one that's supported by Italy and Turkey. So there's no way to govern Libya if it's broken apart like that. So this guy, Gaddafi's son, I think his name is
I forget his name.
ID. It starts with an A. I think it's Sadim or something like that. He actually has a PhD in economics from the London School of Economics. So he was one of the major drivers behind the gold-backed currency, the dinar. The one currency for Africa. He was one of the brains behind it. In fact, he was the biggest brain behind Gaddafi. There's an urgency to actually keep him out of Libyan politics because he would get retaliation on a lot of people who betrayed Muammar.
Yeah. But as far as that war crime that went on, that is a war crime. They've been, Arabs have been killing blacks. Certainly, sub-Saharan Africa, as we saw with the Janjaweed and all that, going in that whole area, and then moving up northbound to Libya. There has been an issue, a racial issue between black Arabs and, let's say, the less melanated ones, and I guess that has always been an old fight, an old issue there. From slavery and all that, so I guess those hatreds are still fairly deep.
Yeah, I mean, it can't. I think Arab racism towards sub-Saharan Africans and Africans in general cannot be understated. When I was in Iraq, there was I don't know if maybe some of you brothers might know, but there's actually black Iraqis, and they're in the southern part of Iraq.
Yeah, I'm aware. In fact, I saw a documentary on that. I actually saw a documentary on it.
Yeah, but they're in the southern part of Iraq called Basra. It's a long story how it came to be, but anyhow, to make a real long story short, in many Arab states, and I mean this is true if you go to places like Zanzibar, stuff like that, you'll see that blacks, Africans tend to still live as third class citizens, people without rights, and many of us, and slavery is still pretty avid in the Arab world, So I don't think we can underestimate the very nature of Arab racism and how it's played out, especially in Libya since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. So yeah.
Hey, look, the
Dr. Phoenix, your mic has dropped significantly, so you might want to
Yeah, can you guys hear me? I'm sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, if you could log off and log back on, that might help.
Okay, all right.
What Dr. Phoenix was saying, this goes all the way back to the drive after Muhammad died. The drive to bring I don't know what we call Islam across the Africa was led by black people. Black, I mean literally Africans.
Mm-hmm.
They were the people who brought Islam all the way to Spain, all the way to what people consider the doorsteps of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
These people are the people that they say people are scared of because they are the mixture of the Europeans and these same black people, the Greeks, some Turks, but Europeans and these same blacks. And now that they have come to power, and I don't know if you guys ever seen the picture of Saud. Saud was black. I mean, like like midnight. But his children, all his children now are almost. If it's somebody look at them, the features are Arabic, but the skin tone is almost European. Spanish, almost like Spain and Albanian. So they are trying to keep the Africans. You can see it in Sudan before they got rid of the leader there. They had killed off most of the black Sudanese and driven them out of Sudan, driven them further south. Was South Sudan now, but they were trying to kill off the people in South Sudan. This thing is in Libya is a three-way battle between Hillary's people in the U.S., the French people who got Hillary into this mess, and now you got the Turks that come in and say, well, and Mike brought in the Turk and the Italian side of the story. But this is it's like after the French got Hillary to do her thing, then the Italians say, you know what, we got to go in too. Mm-hmm. And when Syria kicked off, the Turks said, well, we might as well join in, and that's the way it is now. They can't. This is going to turn out like Syria. If they can clean up Syria and get Syria back to one government, then the same thing is going to happen in Libya. But if they can keep Syria and Libya going, it's going to be confusion. Yes. Until Africa as a nation, not nation states, have Africa as a nation rise up and put an end to all these things, it's going to continue.
Yeah, where is the African Union? Where is well, I don't want to throw in I don't want to throw in the Nation of Islam because I think that the Nation of Islam has already done enough work over there. They have participated with Gaddafi in the past, and I think that they've been compensated as well. So they've been the main supporter of that. But The African Union is very silent on this. No one seems to want to intervene on behalf of the melanated people. I mean, we know about the Tuaregans was slaughtered, in 2011 and 2012. The ones who survived, lived to tell the story about it, but they were slaughtered, man. You're talking about a whole city of people the size of Chicago that got slaughtered, and no one did anything about it to defend these people. And it speaks volumes when you start talking about building a nation state. You have to realize how much goes into that, from a state security standpoint. When Gaddafi was in power, he kept a lot of the terrorists that you see now running around Africa, like Al Shabaab and you know, Coney and the rest of these guys. He kept those guys in check, and he warned the United States and Europe that if you let these guys out of jail, if it's going to be chaos. He kept those guys in jail, or he kept them very pinned down. And that part of Africa, the northern part of Africa, was pretty safe when Gaddafi was in power. Now that he's not there, I mean, it's warring factions all over the place. Maybe they knew this, maybe they predicted it, or maybe they just didn't understand it. But where Libya is right now, it should never be in the state that it's in right now. The Italians, selfish as can be, want their grubby paws on Libya's oil. Sarkozy, who worked with the French military to actually take down Gaddafi, he was rubbing his hands and licking his chops to get in there with his coward ass. And Hillary, we can't forget about Hillary, who was involved in this. And then we can also blame David Cameron.
But her people are still there. You just mentioned that they have an air base there in Libya. Her people are still there. So who's controlling?
There's several air bases in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's several military PMCs inside Libya. Academy, which was formerly Blackwater, they're the most prominent player in there. But you also have the executive group. You have, I forget the other group out of Russia. I forget the name of that group. They're inside there. I mean, everybody's trying to fight over this piece of land, and the Qataris stole Gaddafi's gold out of the vaults, lifting them up on forklifts and put them on these Hercules C-36 or C-130s, whatever they were, the Hercules military aircraft, and took them back to Qatar.
So that's what they're using now to buy the weapons for that they're using in Libya.
I mean, his long, I mean, for the most part, the African Union has been a joke. I mean, they've really never had any real power in the region. So I mean, so I've never really taken them serious. So I'll just leave it at that as regards them.
If there was one nation that you can say was kind of like forging a leadership position in Africa, was Gaddafi. And if you look at
well, I would say very quickly, the thing about Gaddafi was not only did he have economic influence, he also had a military influence.
Strongest military in Africa.
Yeah. So if you really are talking about an AU, and you want to have an AU that's going to be effective, it's going to have some type of a united military force that can, at times, crush certain kinds of madness going on, and dealing with some of these brigands and some of these other I'll call them terrorists that are running around thinking they could pull whatever and do some of the Coney and these guys that can run around and just do it. You got to be able to roll these dudes up, roll them up in a bag, man. And that's
it was Gaddafi. It was Gaddafi that organized the African Union to what it is today.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to it after he passed away was is different than what it was when he was in power, because it was Gaddafi who was in power at the time that denied AFRICOM access to the African continent. When AFRICOM came to the AU and basically said we're going to set up shop here, Gaddafi said absolutely not, and they relocated themselves into Stuttgart, Germany.
All right. What we got now is what we have now is what the Chinese are trying to do. Between the Chinese and the Russians are now trying to build a version of the African Union. And you got, to some extent, the Europeans have got the Ghanaians, what they call ECOWAS, under their, I can't say on their side because I'm not sure yet, but I think that the Ghanaians and the Nigerians and the Western Sahara, like Morocco, they are tending to go kind of like European, while the rest of Africa is going either Russia or Chinese.
Well, I was under the impression that ECOWAS was more of an American invention than a French invention.
No, ECOWAS is not a French invention. ECOWAS is actually it's all the English. One Senegal is English speaking, but you got Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, Gambia. Those are more Western, EU and US, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Ghana is really pushing it. Ghana is going after the expats, African Americans, people from England, they're going after those people to bring them back into Africa. Whereas the
Because
Chinese are,
yeah.
yeah,
No,
go
I
ahead,
was just
Mike.
gonna say that they need the human capital. They don't have the human capital like they want to have. So they need to bring all those people back to or not bring them back, but to actually populate their state with intellectual bodies, human capital. I wish ADOS people on YouTube really understood that difference in thinking. That you need an intellectual class, a technocratic class of people that's going to actually be able to manage your society. This idea that you can have, these rogue elements of men running around on dirt bikes and gold teeth in their mouth and greatest of all time, or whatever he's supposed to be, leading off your community without actually understanding the intricate details in building a society. They just don't seem to get that part. They think backwards. They think, you can build your society with these rogue class of people. The Ottoman Empire collapsed when the underachieved and underperforming class of people tried to take over. It didn't last for more than 2 years, if I remember correctly. Same thing in Somalia. Once the educated class, your doctors and your engineers and your chief scientists, once they fled the country, the state went into chaos, and you had these warring factions all over the place.
I mean, I agree wholesale. I mean, again, I've met and know numerous brothers from Ghana, and that they talk about that a lot. Again, they need they need the human capital in Ghana, and as a whole in Africa in general, because one of the tech is one of the major industries in Ghana. And so much of for example, so much of the biomedical research that happens in Africa is funded by the U.S. government.
Right.
It's funded through the NIH, to be specific. And again, so there's a brain drain in Africa, because again, the best and brightest minds of Africa get poached off to Western countries like America and Britain. And so again, what ultimately happens is that they do need folks like ADOS to come into countries like Ghana to bring the mental faculty, to bring the intellectual faculties and human capital that the country needs to grow and sustain itself. So
yeah, the thing that
I
we
always
don't seem
argued.
to get is that the thing that we don't seem to get is that yes, you can go to Africa if you got a U.S. passport and you spend a year in Africa, you can come back to the U.S. If you build a business in Africa, you can have connections in the U.S. You don't have to live per se. You don't have to give up your residency to go to Africa. A lot of like Ghana now is giving, you come to Africa. After you get there, the more people who go there, the more things are going to change. Because me, say I go there with my American passport, I get married to a Ghanaian woman. 100, say 1,000 of us go there. Our children are going to be raised with a mental ability of built on Western standards or Black American standards. So we're going to be integrated into society, bringing our ideas, and our children are going to push those ideas along. That's the way it's going to work.
Yeah, it's up to the African Union to create mechanisms in place, to put mechanisms in place that allows melanated people to come back to the continent. It shouldn't be up to ADOS members to actually build the continent, on behalf of the of corrupt leaders. I think that they should come up with better mechanisms that allow melanated people to come back. I've always argued that from a soft policy standpoint, HBCU should have been reaching out to Africa and establishing HBCUs on the continent itself as a form
I
of
agree.
soft policy.
I actually agree with that. I think that would have been a great idea, given that we know historically HBCUs have been underfunded.
Hmm.
So it would be it would be logical that they would try to establish some connection within the diaspora, within various countries in Africa, to help, one, to get to get some of the best and brightest minds from the HBCU into Africa, but also to get a lot of that capital that can help fund it, because again, and no offense to the brothers, that I know there might be some brothers in the chat that might have went to HBCUs, but HBCUs, at least in terms of resources, are just not competitive with with their white counterparts. They're just not, you know.
But they would be a shoe-in for African universities,
Yeah, they
just
would.
which is what most sub-Saharan Africa had lacked for so many decades. The initial institutions to actually cultivate a class of people that's going to be the next, innovators and leaders of this society in a fourth
Yeah,
industrialized economy. That would have played in great. I think there are Morehouse is probably one of the best institutions for STEM in terms of HBCUs.
I would agree with that. I actually would agree with that. I was at Morehouse last summer visiting. Um, it's a good institution. I mean, it's very solid. They got some great minds there. I personally know some physicians there that have worked on the Hela cells. And so I mean, it's a great institution that actually pumps out. Actually, I'd probably say of all the HBCUs, I'd probably say the Morehouse grads tend to be the most impressive to me. So
Because
I think they certainly have the students that can get it done. And again, we already know the major issue in Africa is one of infrastructure. They have always lacked the infrastructure, and they lack the technology to build that infrastructure.
hmm right, that would have been tied in with another piece of foreign policy. Now you can start talking about other soft mechanisms such as creating these visas, direct visas for ADOS members to come back and forth between the continent as much as they please, as long as they do the necessary background checks and fingerprints and things like that. You know, now you have a stronger contingent. I mean, well, what do you say? What 45 to 50 million ADOS people live in America, or what's considered to be melanated people live in America? Okay, fine. You take the immediate economy of those ADOS people, and then you combine that and integrate that with the continent. Now you have some increased economic power.
Yeah, one of the things that you can do now is you can get on an airplane and go to Ghana. My first trip to Ghana, my company had to get me a visa. The company I worked for had to get me a visa to go to Ghana. I, as a black man from America, had to get somebody to invite me there. Now you can get on an airplane and go to Ghana. You can get on an airplane and go to Nigeria. You don't need a visa anymore. You get there, your passport gets stamped. So we don't have, instead of complaining that the Chinese are taking over Africa, You can just get on an airplane, go there, visit, see what it's like. You might like it, you might not. You know what I'm saying? But when you come back home, your family is going to see that, hey, you didn't die in Africa. Somebody didn't eat you, so you're safe now. So Africa is
Mhm.
okay. You know.
Well, a lot of people don't like to travel. A lot of us black folks don't like to travel. You talk about that a lot, and you'll get some pushback. People don't like to travel, or they'll tell you that they can't.
You
It's
Because
hit the
also
nail on the
expensive.
head, bro.
what's
Yeah,
that?
that's one.
No,
One that
oh,
yeah. I think get to Ghana, it
I-
cost me $1,000.
yeah, but to get to, let's say, to Europe would it cost you half that, right? And it's further away.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I used to. I remember I used to fly from. I used to fly from the U.S. To London. You can get like you can get a ticket for like $500-600. I mean, wasn't terribly bad. And even from there, if you went from, let's say, London, like I used to when I was in London, I used to travel from London to Morocco all the time. And I used to get a little Ryanair flight out of Gatwick Airport for like $25. So I mean, it's dirt cheap. And I think one of the good things is that in general, if you are in a place like Europe, it's fairly cheap, reasonably cheap to get to African countries. Especially those in northern and western Africa. So it's not terribly expensive. But again, I think part of the problem is that you know a lot of Africans from the continent, the best and the brightest minds, they do get poached off. That was a very good. This I saw this maybe about 10 years ago on 60 Minutes, where they talked about a program that was at MIT, where they were poaching off. They were poaching off like 12-year-olds from Africa. They were poaching
Yeah.
off
Yep.
literally prodigies in Africa. They were poaching them off, bringing them to the U.S. And actually, how they were doing it. They had another brother that was from Africa that was a student that was helping to run this program funded by, I can't remember the organization, but they were using him to go into the country and find some of the best and brightest minds and poach them and bring and the MIT would recruit these young people. And on top of that, I can tell you specifically, there are programs funded through the NIH where they would bring in folks from like they would bring in researchers, promising doctoral students from various countries in Africa, and they would pay for them to get their PhDs. They would do their dissertations through the NIH, get funding, everything else, everything, the whole nine. And then they would bring them back, and they would send them back to Africa, and they would be in a position where many of these folks would move into the reins of power within their respective countries. And they've been doing this for quite some time.
Yeah, and that's where HBCUs failed.
I agree.
Yep. Let me read this article real quick because we only got so much time left. This one's from AlJazeera.com. A new Cold War in Africa. Increasing tensions between China and the U.S. will be detrimental to African prosperity and peace. Last week, the 12th U.S. Africa Business Summit, a high-level event attended by 11 African heads of state and government and some 1,000 business leaders, was held in Maputo, Mozambique. Uh, DE Raptor, you're gonna have to mute yourself, please. During the three-day event, U.S. officials unveiled a $60 billion investment agency, which will seek to invest in a low and middle income countries with a special focus on Africa. The announcement came 6 months after National Security Advisor John Bolton presented the Trump administration's new Africa strategy. According to the document, great power competitors, namely China and Russia, are rapidly expanding their financial and political influence across Africa. They are deliberately and aggressively targeting their investments in the region to gain a competitive advantage over the United States. Although both China and Russia are mentioned over the past few months, the U.S. has demonstrated that it is mainly concerned about the former. In fact, it already appears that Africa is set to become yet another battleground for the escalating trade war between Beijing and Washington. With increasing foreign military presence and growing diplomatic tensions, the continent is already witnessing the first signs of an emerging new Cold War. And just like the previous one devastated Africa, fueling wars and forcing African governments to make economic choices not in their best interest, this one will be also be detrimental to the African development and peace. China's approach to Africa has always been a trade oriented. The continent became one of the top destinations for Chinese investment after Beijing introduced the so-called "Go Out" policy in 1999, which encouraged private and state-owned businesses to seek economic opportunities abroad. As a result, Chinese trade with Africa has increased 40-fold over the past 2 decades. In 2017, it stood at $140 billion. And between 2003 and 2017, Chinese foreign direct investment (FDI) flows have also jumped more close to 60-fold to $4 billion per year. FDI stocks stand at $43 billion, a significant part of which has gone into infrastructure and energy projects. China has significantly expanded African railways, investing in various projects in Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Angola, and Nigeria. It is currently building a massive hydropower plant in Angola and have built Africa's longest railway connecting Ethiopia and Djibouti. It has built the headquarters of the African Union in Addis Ababa and the Western African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, in Judah. By contrast, for a long time, the U.S. has viewed Africa as a battlefield where it can confront its enemies, whether the Soviets during the Cold War, terrorists after 9/11, or now the Chinese. Washington has never really never really made a concerted effort to develop its economic relations with the continent. Oh shit. As a result, trade between the U.S. and Africa has decreased from $120 billion in 2012 to just over $50 billion today. U.S. FDI flows have also slumped from $9.4 billion in 2009 to around $330 million in 2017. The new $60 billion investment fund announced last week is a welcome initiative from the U.S., but it will not be able to challenge Chinese economic presence on the continent. Just last year, Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged $60 billion but dedicated solely to to investment in Africa. The U.S. has repeatedly accused China of using debt to hold states in Africa captive to its wishes and demands, and has warned African states to avoid Chinese debt diplomacy, which is supposedly incompatible with the independence of African nations and civil society, and poses a significant threat to U.S. national security interests. Yet Africa is only the fourth biggest recipient of Chinese FDI after Europe, mainly Germany, UK, and the Netherlands, the Americas, mainly US and Canada, and Asia. The US has also borrowed heavily from China. Currently, its debt to its rival stands at $1.12 trillion. By contrast, Africa owes China around $83 billion. Africans are fully aware of and concerned about high indebtedness, trade imbalances, the relatively poor quality of Chinese goods and services, and Beijing's application of lower standards of labor and environmental practices. But many do not share the Americans' perspective that their economic relationship with China is to their detriment, and rather see it as an opportunity that provides much needed unconditional funding and that takes into account local priorities. As Djibouti's President Ismail Omar Gula has pointed out, the reality is that no one but the Chinese offers a long-term partnership. The pressure the U.S. currently exerting on African countries to move away from partnerships with China could hurt African economies. It could force African countries into making choices that are not in their best economic interest and miss out on important development projects or funding. Meanwhile, the U.S.-China trade war is already affecting the continent. According to the African Development Bank, it could cause as much as 2.5% decrease in GDP for resource-intensive African economies and a 1.9% dip for oil exporting countries. The escalating tensions between U.S. and China could also end up threatening the security of the continent. Both countries are militarily involved in Africa. Over the past 15 years, the Chinese People's Liberation Army has been engaged in a number of security missions across the continent, making modest auxiliary troop contributions to peacekeeping operations in Sudan, South Sudan, Liberia, Mali, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. It has also contributed millions of dollars of peacekeeping equipment to the African Union mission in Somalia and provided significant funding to Intergovernmental Authority on Development for its mediation in South Sudan. In 2017, the Chinese overseas military base was opened in Djibouti. The facility, which currently hosts about 400 staff and troops, has the capacity to accommodate 10,000, is officially supposed to provide support for ongoing anti-piracy operations of the Chinese Navy, but it also plays a role in securing maritime routes, part of the Belt and Road Initiative. There has also been speculation that this is the first of a number of planned bases meant to secure Chinese interests in Africa. China's military presence in Africa, however, pales in comparison to that of the U.S. over the past few years. U.S. Africa Command has some 36 different military operations in 13 African countries, including Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, Libya, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Somalia, South Sudan, and Tunisia. It also has 7,000 troops deployed to the continent. It has a large base in Djibouti, the biggest and only permanent U.S. military base in Africa, but it also runs at least 34 other military outposts scattered across the west, east, and north of the continent where U.S. troops are deployed and military operations are launched from. The U.S. also directly supports the armies of Egypt, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Mali, Niger, and others, as well as the G5 Sahel force tasked with counterterrorism. While a direct confrontation between the U.S. and Chinese forces in Africa is unlikely, their growing presence is becoming an increasingly destabilizing factor. Already, Washington's strategy to contain Chinese influence over Africa is playing out at different conflict and social upheaval hotspots across the continent. The fallout of the U.S. Chinese competition is particularly apparent in the strategic Red Sea region, through which passes one of the most important maritime routes. Countries in the region are not only feeling growing U.S. and Chinese pressure to take one side or the other, but are also increasingly exposed to outside interference by various regional powers. I'm not going to read this whole thing. The Cold War is here, so any of you all can jump in there.
Totally predictable. This is absolutely predictable. No surprise here. China came in, started to move in, took advantage of quite a bit of the United States short-sightedness in the region, in Africa, just to kind of abuse it in some ways and try to keep Africa from developing. China's coming in there and they're looking at definitely getting involved, but helping Africa to develop as well. They're looking to help Africa develop, and United States is now sitting there saying this is going to be a problem for us in the future from a manufacturing perspective and so forth. There's going to be some real issues here. So what China is really looking, what China's really looking at doing, what America's looking at doing in the region. I think we're two different issues, and now, how would I say, you know, the United States is threatened by what's going on there, and they're definitely going to be tensions, and there's going to be there's likely to be a strong proxy war there as well. I would hope that wouldn't happen, but I think we were kind of talking about this a little bit before, Mike. What we thought, how we thought America might respond to the Chinese being there, and I definitely feel that tensions are definitely going to rise a lot higher, because this is a very key area that America has kind of lost a step on, and the Chinese have to step up, and
It's
where
also
America.
the attitude.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, it's also the attitude. So the attitude that the Chinese have and the Russians have is, we don't care about human rights violations and all that other stuff. We just care about helping you build. And are you on par with us in terms of that agenda? And that works best for African countries, right? From a leadership standpoint. Whereas U.S., they come in there and they say you got to have same-sex marriage, you got to accept LGBTQ, you got to have all these damaging social policies for in order to take a loan, and that goes against their culture and their best interests. And now you have rainbow flags all popping up in certain parts of the continent that was never there prior to Europeans arriving on shores, almost 1,000 years ago. So what I'm saying here is that Chinese don't come with all these strings attached, in the way that the article makes it seem like it's a debt trap. Well, guess what? ADOS is in a debt trap too, in terms of reparations.
If you look at the American and European um, dealing with Africa, going back to slavery, you see it was based on chaos. One nation, one tribe, one village fighting against the other, and they all benefit who? The Chinese are coming and say, look, if you look from South Sudan, for instance, they were fighting one another. When the Chinese get involved in it, they sign a contract, say, look, the war is going to end. Then the Americans got involved again and start Exxon Mobil and all that start going in and they start fighting again. Now the Chinese step in and the war is ended. If you see what's happening, where the Chinese go, the Chinese going, in order for them to develop the places that they're going, they have to have a peaceful country. It's still going to have a little bit of infighting, you got political thing, but look at the LGBT and all that. It's causing chaos across some of Africa, and that's how the European, the EU, and the American deal with Africa. They can cause chaos, take out the raw materials, and that's it. They did that. That's how they control Iraq. They try and do it in Iran, Libya, Syria. Even Morocco. People look at Morocco and think that Morocco don't have problems, but South Sahara is not Moroccan territory. But guess what? It's got total wealth in South Sahara.
Got oil.
The Moroccans want to keep. The Moroccans want to control that. And the Tuareg, Mike was talking about the Tuaregs. That's now the Tuaregs. That's their land. So this is European style. This is European style versus Chinese and Russian style. The Russians and Chinese, they want to have it might not be peace throughout the whole country, but have a quiet country, no wars. You know what I'm saying? Whereas look at Congo, man, the Israelis are reaping out of Congo like crazy. The British and the Israelis are reaping out of Congo like crazy.
Because Israel needs those resources in Africa to survive as an industrialization standpoint, especially for their space exploration projects. They need those resources, or else they can't survive. As a matter of fact, they can't survive without water, which is what they're fighting for right now. They need access to to Lebanon's water resources, and they can't get to it without putting up a fight against the rest of the Islamic society. But yeah, to your point about China, not China, but Africa as a whole, is that I think this is the perfect opportunity for ADOS to really organize themselves as a political bloc and have some form of foreign policy involved in it. Because when you take into consideration Latinos and other ethnic groups in the United States, a lot of them send money back to their native lands all the time. They're sending millions, if not at least $1 billion a year in outflow, in terms of capital outflow, sending money back to their native lands and actually having some influence there. But this is what I'm saying here, is that this is the perfect opportunity for ADOS to throw their hat in the ring and really organize and start putting pressure on on the continent to start doing right and start doing better by the people. I think there's a lot of opportunity here for investment, for ADOS people. But unfortunately, ADOS people are not organized. I spoke about this several times before, but I had a meeting in February with several members from the African continent, civil engineers and business leaders, and they told me personally, they sat me down, told me personally that they would like, Africans would prefer to do business with melanated people in America, but brothers don't got themselves together. And when you go through the Black manosphere, you can see how disorganized many brothers are.
There's an African Union ambassador specifically to the diaspora in America, going all across the country, saying to us, hey, will you please invest? You don't have to invest $1 million. You can put $100 into the bank, and your $100 will turn into $1 billion, and we can invest that in Africa, and we can make money out of it, and you will benefit, and Africa will benefit. And this woman is just preaching.
Yeah. There's one thing about this article that stuck out to me. That this whole idea of debt lending from China. I mean, let's just be real here. The only reason most of these European countries haven't gone belly up is because of the reverse reparations that African countries pay them.
Bingo.
I mean, essentially, what you let in the U.S. and what happens? Who comes in? With the IMF, the World Bank? So I mean, to talk about, the African countries, you let the IMF or the World Bank come in. I mean, Africa, they'll be paying off the Western powers to the end of time. So again, this idea of that there's going to be all this debt. I mean, I think this is the one of these scenarios. The choice of you pick the choice of you got the choice between two evils here. Again, I won't consider China the absolute best friend of Africa, but they certainly offer them a hell of a lot better deal than what the U.S. is offering. The U.S. is offering, let us come in, let us bring in all these liberal movements and policies. I mean, they've been heavily pushing. I mean, even during Obama's presidency, he's over on African continent lecturing Black leaders about why they need to support LGBT rights.
Yeah, they try to shove it down their throat.
Yeah, so again, it's just like, and they're looking at him funny, like, get the hell out of here.
His first.
Go ahead, brother.
No, I was just gonna say his first inauguration, they were welcoming him with open arms, saying, "Yes, come over here. You're one of us." And then when he got over there, it was like, "Oh, get this nigga up out of here, please. Get this nigga up out of here."
I mean, and that's essentially what happened. He spent his 8 years getting AFRICOM entrenched within the African continent, and also while simultaneously trying to push these policies. Oh, these countries need to support LGBT rights. Oh, they need to support women's rights, and oh, we gotta go do the Coney 2012 thing. Like, get the hell out of here with this crap. Are you serious?
Yeah, they had Uganda girl. They had Uganda girl in there, countering a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's
I
interesting
mean,
that they
so they offer you a poison pill. Not to say that China might not necessarily be offering a poison pill, but again, which one will kill you first, the U.S. or China? So I
yeah,
mean,
I think you might get
what's that,
yeah, I
brother?
think you might get heartburn. Yeah, I was gonna say I think you might get heartburn with pork fried rice, but what the U.S. was offering was a lot more
Mike,
deadly.
that's stupid.
Oh, and here's my Chinese ambassador right here, Scholar Cheng. What's going on?
Mike,
You have
you
anything to
stupid,
add?
man. Why would you say you get burned by pork fried rice? There's no way you can get burned by pork fried rice, and you know that.
No, no, I was saying heartburn, brother, heartburn.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good,
Scholar
good.
Chang, what's
Chilling,
going
man,
on,
chilling.
brother?
Hey, I do want to say though, speaking of political correctness, I do agree with Mike, especially when it comes to you guys mentioned about the LGBTQ, right? Yeah, well, Chinese government are usually not on the quote unquote politically correct side. So when they see something that does not work, they know it's not going to be beneficial to the nation, they will crack down on it, just like how Russia, which is similar to what Russia does. And so, I mean, in fact, I think outside the Western world, most countries are not as I won't use the word utopian, but just what would be a better words to describe this? Very unrealistic when it comes to managing its socio-political. Like for example,
Liberal,
you got yeah. I'm sorry. What
liberal,
you say?
liberal. They don't want liberal ideas. You can do anything that you want to do
Yeah,
as long as it benefit us.
yeah. Let's just be
Yeah,
honest here.
thugs can kill you.
Yeah, let's just be honest here. Uh, Part of the reason I'm pretty sure, like I said, people always make the analogy between Roman Empire and the United States, right? Which I found to be so accurate. I mean, look at Roman Empire when it first rise. It was all masculine, worship masculine ideals. Everything is raw, unfiltered. During early Republic years. That's why it became so powerful. Same thing with the United States. But now look at what the United States has become. They didn't just quit that Navy SEALs that supposedly quote unquote killed an ISIS fighter or wherever. Can you imagine that ever happened in other countries? That were actually convict on the verge of convict its own war heroes and so forth. So that's why Mike, you mentioned about the whole LGBTQ. That's just one aspect of it. I mean, there's a whole onslaught of making America effete and powerless. I'm not sure exactly what the agenda is. Like I said, are they really trying to destroy America as we know it, or are they just trying to reform it in the image? But either way, like I say, it's not going to go well. And now, especially on the verge of with the stand whole quote unquote war with Iran, you got to be kidding me. You got to be really, really goddamn kidding me. America cannot afford another damn war. You can't even finish the damn war that we have already started with Afghanistan and so forth. So yeah, that's what I want to mention. Oh, by the way, I love pork fried rice. Just saying.
Oh yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah, I do.
All right, let me get to this next article. This is the last article. This one's from RT.com. Chinese ambassador to UK hands off Hong Kong. Let me expand this out. China's ambassador to the United Kingdom urged Britain to stay out of Chinese affairs and slammed the government's rhetorical support for recent protests in Hong Kong that escalated into violent clashes with police. Britain was on the wrong side of the issue, Ambassador Li Xiaoming said on Wednesday, insisting that Hong Kong be left to manage its own affairs, including the fate of the controversial extradition bill that was recently suspended in Parliament. I tell British officials, hands off Hong Kong and show respect, Liu told reporters in English. The colonial mindset is still haunting the minds of some officials or politicians who regard Hong Kong as still under British rule. Asked about former UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson's rhetorical support for protesters, Liu stressed that non-interference is a key principle of Chinese-British relations. As long as these principles are violated, there will be a problem in the relationship, Liu said. Johnson is the front-runner in the Conservative Party contest to replace Prime Minister Theresa May, set to conclude later this month. The British government has requested a meeting with Liu after his remarks, which the Foreign Office deemed unacceptable, Reuters reports. Demonstrations to mark the anniversary of Hong Kong's handover from British to Chinese rule turned violent on Monday, when a group of protesters stormed and briefly occupied the city's Parliament chamber. 13 have been arrested for participation in the incident, according to Hong Kong police. The unrest follows months of protests over a contentious bill that would allow Beijing to extradite wanted persons to the mainland, which has also prompted calls for the city's chief executive, Carrie Lam, to resign. Hong Kong was under British colonial rule for over 150 years before officially returning to Chinese sovereignty in 1997. It is currently administered under a one country, two systems arrangement, which allows the territory some autonomy. Scholar Chang.
Yeah, I'm here.
What's your take on this?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you guys know. Have you guys ever met any Hong Kong people from Hong Kong? Period. Has any of you guys met people from Hong Kong? Period.
Outside of 212, I don't know.
Okay, well, one very unique feature about people from Hong Kong is that they deny Hong Kong. Okay, I don't know how to translate that. So in Chinese language, right, there's two words for referring to Chinese people. One word referring to Chinese people as a collective. You talk about Chinese people include everywhere. The one living abroad, the one that's born in other country, the one that's born in China mainland, and so forth. And there's another word that refers to specifically Chinese people that live in the mainland. Okay, so when Hong Kong people, when you met them, they always refer to themselves as the former. That we are Chinese people, we are Chinese, but we're not Chinese from mainland. Okay, so what's my point? My point is that, as you guys know, the Hong Kong people has, as a result of years of being living under British rules and so forth, they have grown very accustomed to the Western ideals of democracy, individual freedom, and so forth. In fact, if you guys know about the Hong Kong history, Hong Kong used to be the refuge sanctuary, right, for any dissidents from the Chinese mainland. And Chinese mainland cannot do anything to it because, it was under form British rule, right? So that's why with this whole extradition rule right now, it reminds Hong Kong vividly that it's painful history of well, I won't say painful history, but is previous history of how many of the refugees that will come from Chinese mainland have to now gonna under the threats of being persecuted again. Well, not just being persecuted. In fact, who knows? A lot of cases being killed. So that's why this whole bill creates such an enormous controversy, because you can understand Hong Kong is full of distance from the Chinese Communist Party. Literally, you can bump into any Hong Kong, they will know some Hong Kongese. They will tell you somebody they knew from escaping from the mainland China. So that's why this one brought such an enormous emotion. Now, in regards to the Russia, they want to escaping. The article say that tell the Chinese government tell British to stay out of it. Well, it's impossible because the Hong Kong people still cling their loyalty to the British, believe it or not. That's why you notice a lot of the Hong Kong people from China, Hong Kong people, they have the British last name. I think you guys notice or not. They always have a British last name or first name. That tells you that they still have a loyalty to British. They consider themselves part of the British Commonwealth. Let me put it this way. So yeah, that's why the Chinese government wants to, tell British to stay out of. Well, it's impossible, because no matter what, it's like a separation partner. How no matter what, the emotional connections do. That's all.
Nagone, you have anything you want to add to this?
Nope.
All right, Dr. Phoenix.
No, I don't have anything to add. I think Scholar Chain, he said it best. I mean, again, don't have much to add in that regard.
DE.
Yeah, Scholar China wrapped it up, bro. I agree with him. The people in Hong Kong. I've been to Hong Kong a few times, and the people in Hong Kong consider themselves British more than mainland Chinese. They know they have families over there, but they have this freedom in Hong Kong that they won't give up.
So, do you think that does anybody on the panel think that the Chinese government from the mainland will finally assert itself militarily over the region and just basically assert themselves there?
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Whoever want to say. Go.
I don't know if they'll do that. I mean, I remember. Because the Chinese could have done it a few times. I mean, when they ran Chiang Kai-shek off of the mainland, and then that's where they went to, and they didn't attack them and destroy that them there. So I don't see that happening. I just think that that's just a part of what China is at this stage, and I don't know how long that'll go on, but maybe they'll find a way to kind of work between Hong Kong and the mainland. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. Maybe they'll come to some kind of an agreement, because I don't see war and all that being or serious violent conflict being beneficial.
Yeah. Well, here's my take on this. The same tactics that we're seeing here, taking over parliament buildings, causing disruption, political destabilization. We saw the same thing in 2013 in Kiev, in the Ukraine. Same exact tactics. Victoria Nuland out there giving out cookies to the terrorists, supporting it. The United States backed it. We saw the same thing in the United States recently with Guaido trying to take over the Venezuelan embassy in Washington and causing disruption. You also saw the same thing again in what do you call that? Damn, what's the state that I'm thinking about right now?
Where was it?
Damn, I can't remember right now, but it was recently. Basically, these sort of hit and run tactics that is happening isn't by accident. This is MI6 at work. Hong Kong being a former British territory, MI6 has their hands all over this. CIA has their hands all over, and I would say Canadian intelligence as well has their hands all over Ukraine. Now you see Canadian soldiers inside Ukraine training these Sloboda, far right Ku Klux Klan Europe-like terrorist groups. It's only a matter of time before you start seeing firearms pumped into Hong Kong, and they try to take on the mainland government and try to create a Tiananmen Square all over again in 2020.
You really think so?
Yeah, I think that's where they're going with this, because the United States not too long ago, I think some months ago, this is during the Trump administration, tried to dock their warships in Hong Kong, and the Chinese government told them to get lost. They've never done that before.
I don't think the CIA would ever bring guns into Hong Kong. I mean,
I
that
don't
would
know.
be an act
I
of
I,
war.
I gotta
MI6.
hear what
Act
Scholar
of
Chang has to
war.
say on this. Scholar, what do you say, man?
Well, I think Mike goes definitely go a little deeper than I did in terms of analyzing that. I think that here's what I believe, right? If yeah, okay, I'm ready. If China can touch Hong Kong, guess what other country? Guess what another place they're gonna touch?
China can touch Hong Kong. Are you talking about Korea?
Taiwan.
Taiwan.
Exactly. And guess and guess what? And Taiwan has a joint military, almost similar to the one with South Korea, with United States. So what's that mean? That means if China is given the go ahead to assert itself militarily in Hong Kong, you will do the same in Taiwan. And yeah, and what's going to happen with Taiwan when the assert is Taiwan? Well, that's going to lead to a almost direct conflict with America. So that's a scenario that nobody wants to get into, because then we talk about a direct confrontation. So
Do you think that America? You think America would actually get involved in Taiwan?
I have a well. Here's the thing: it's not what America wants; it's what's behind America. We all know at this point what's behind America
the
wants.
oligarchs.
Yeah, the oligarchs, exactly. So it's really up to them. But I think that, like I said, really at this point, we talk about two group of oligarchs fighting each other. We talk about the oligarchs from the Far East Asia, and we talk about oligarchs from the Far West. So really, at this point, is really what they want. We just all these scenario that we're seeing, just chess pieces. You mentioned about that. The whole Mike. You know, very very excellent analogy about how this is similar to the recent, all these recent quote unquote democratic revolution and so forth. Yeah, I won't be surprised if the Western world is behind this Hong Kong uprising. On top of the Hong Kong's identity itself, and its history with British and so forth. Really, like I said, they just want. Well, it's like an onion. One layer is overlap another one.
Well, the former MI6 agent was on RT earlier and talked about that. She said it herself that that's all MI6 in there.
Well, you guys realize that the CIA see an opportunity to push China because what China is doing in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So the CIA and MI6 are behind this whole thing.
They have to create disruption as a way to ante up the trade war, because although Trump made concessions with Huawei, the U.S. is still hurting from this. They're if this was a fight, they got a bloody nose and a busted lip from this. So they want retribution on the mainland, and the best way to do that is to light a fire under their soft underbelly, which is Hong Kong. In the same way they light a fire in the underbelly of Russia and Georgia, and with these political.
I may have to agree with you on that, Mike. I actually might actually sit here and think about it. I think I may have to agree with you on that. Very similar to what's going on over there in Eastern Europe and what they did. You may be right. You very well may be right. I haven't thought through it as well. I really haven't. So, but what you're saying right now makes quite a bit of sense. So I'll look at that a little more. But yeah.
Yeah, I would
because
agree with
why
that.
is the British? Yeah, why is the British so right? Why are British Parliament members so actively involved in any say so in what's going on right now in Hong Kong? It doesn't belong to them.
Uh-oh. Sorry about that.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's something that needs to be further investigated. And Scholar Chang, I'm going to need you on the flight out to Hong Kong the next morning.
Yeah.
I may need a passport again as being a U.S. citizen now. I may need a visa again. Hey,
Yeah,
one more thing.
Yeah, I don't want you to end up like Edward Snowden.
Oh God. I hope. I mean, well, I hope not. I hope not. Knock on wood. One more thing I do want to add. I think the more likely scenario, instead of direct confrontation, military confrontation, it's more like a black operation. I think, just like how the mainland Chinese
Whoa,
government
whoa,
has.
whoa, whoa, whoa! What are you trying to say? African American operation? What's going on?
Mike silly as
You
hell.
said black operation. What you talking about?
Mike is silly.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
Politically correct speaking. African American melanated operation. Yes. Okay. What I'm saying is, what I'm trying to say is that the Chinese mainland has been infiltrating Taiwan government for a long time, right? And ever since when they're gonna do the same. What they do right now is they're gonna do the same thing, except they're gonna do a lot more drastic scale now with the Hong Kong. So that's what I want to add.
Dr. Phoenix, you were going to go ahead and say something.
No, I mean I don't have nothing to add. I actually agree with your sentiment. Again, I think the U.S. is still a bit salty, so yeah. So I can totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean we're at the end of the hangout. Any closing thoughts on anything that was said tonight?
No. Again, great hangout. Again, thank you, brother Mike V, for having me on. Certainly appreciate the input of the brothers on the panel and in the chat. Again, as we talked about, as ADOS, I think we miss prime opportunities to network and reach out within the diaspora and the continent of Africa and establish, what would have been, very feasible and economically prosperous partnerships for us. And so, again, hopefully, we'll get our act together and kind of stop with all of the foolishness and chicanery that takes place in our daily activities, and begin to focus more on building the necessary intellectual property and producing more Black people that are more functional, that have more functional skills and abilities for the 21st century. So I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have to totally agree with the Dr. Phoenix on that. Totally agree on that. That's exactly what we need to be focusing on, because that is critical. So I second that, third it, fourth it, fifth it. What do you want to say? I'm totally down with that. Also, pull us a little out of just the African American realm. The situation between Iran and Israel, and Israel moving into Iranian airspace and kind of doing what they want to do. Very scary. That's a game changer. That's something that we really have to sit down and take a look at. And as tensions start to mount more and more, these activities start to happen, we have to really watch this very closely. This could get real hot, a little faster than we might think, and maybe the outcome of what we might think might not what we might think or what we might not want. So I just say, just keep our eyes on that. That's a game changer, and that's as far as everything else. That's good. Great hangout. Once again, Black Brain Trust throwing down.
Mm-hmm. DE, you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, but what Nicole was just saying, I think even Trump is beginning to recognize that this war talk with Iran is getting out of hand, and he's trying to ratchet it down. A lot of people are pointing out that he didn't take his war hawks to Japan with him, and that's a sign that he's having some, he's kind of like looking at it from his own perspective, and I wouldn't let the Israelis push them into a war. look what they pushed the Saudis into this war now that the Saudis I mean Saudis up there alone. And the Saudis are spending their money in this war that they're supposed to be spending on their people. So this is really crazy. But anyway, we live in a world where people where the how I can't remember how my aunt used to put it now, but people are choosing sides, which side you're going to be on, because this is in what, since the U.S. became the hegemon, there never been countries has never had this opportunity to choose which side they want to be on, especially countries in Africa. And you see, even countries in South America, you say, look, one time you used to have just Cuba and Nicaragua. Now you have other countries in South America saying, hey, we're not going to accept that. Even Mexico next door to us, U.S. has to threaten them to destroy their economy for them to get just one little movement out of Mexico. So you know what? We're gonna hold the migrants from coming through. U.S. had to threaten them. You're gonna shut down your economy if you don't do this. So countries are having a choice nowadays, and they're using it. A lot of people pay with their lives. Saddam did. The guy in Syria almost did. Libya, Gaddafi did. So you may as well take the opportunity and make sure they benefit from it.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Hit the like button if you have not already done so, and you're just now watching this or just now jumping in. Share the video if possible. And we'll be back tomorrow. I believe it's 4th of July, but I think Lionel has his crypto talk tomorrow. Also, there'll be another open chat in the afternoon before Black Crypto Talk. So make sure you all join us for that.
All right. Have a good evening, brothers.